Now, today, we are gonna see, what if Harry time traveled, to defeat his doppelganger? Join Patreon for early ACESS and exclusive content of Super Op stories, also. Adult and steamy Harry Potter stories too. Please subscribe this channel, because definitely I will try my best to provide a valuable content for you all. Also check the description to support the original author for this beautiful creation. Be warned, do post comments that's not related to this story or you'll get muted from me. It's been 15 years since the final war. Harry's enjoyed his life so far, but he sometimes wondered if it could have been different. He wished more than anything that his life would change. So he went to meet Dumbledore's brother, Aberforth. He knocked on the door of the tavern and Aberforth opened the door and said, "Harry, good to see you." Harry replied, "Thanks, just wanted a chat." Aberforth said, "Come inside." Harry did just that and sat down on the couch. He said, "I was wondering what Voldemort was like at school." Aberforth said, "Well, he was an amazing student. He liked every professor, but he liked Slughorn the most. Although he didn't get along with Dippet or my brother." Harry asked, "Why didn't he get along with them?" Aberforth replied, "Well, young Tom wanted to be a defense against the dark arts master at Hogwarts. He asked for this not once but twice. First he asked Armando Dippet and then later Albus Dumbledore, but both said no, which made him furious, and it was strongly suspected that he jinxed the position in revenge. The upshot of the alleged jinx was that defense against the dark arts teachers only lasted a maximum of 1 year." Harry laughed. "So that's how the jinx started. Imagine a world where Voldemort was defense teacher." Aberforth said, "If that happened, then lots of things would have turned out differently, even you." Harry asked, "Would a paradox happen that would mean my parents would be alive?" Aberforth said, "Yes, definitely. And if you got stuck there, then your mum and dad might not have you but a girl instead." Harry was thinking about all the possibilities. He asked, "What year would be best?" Aberforth said, "The best would be 1944 after Grindelwald War." Harry said, "Yeah, halfway through the Muggle Second World War. That would do nicely." Abe handed him a small book containing a time-traveling spell and information on Tom for Harry to study. Harry said his goodbyes and went on his way. He arrived back home and started to read all about his nemesis. He found out that he and Tom had lots in common, more than he thought. And Harry also thought about what his name would have been in the past. He also needed to find a place for him and Tom to live. Then the thought occurred to him, why not the Shrieking Shack? It's well hidden and it hasn't been touched since his parents' era. He asked Hermione about it and they agreed to go together. Hermione wandered inside and asked, "Are you seriously considering time travel? You know how dangerous the consequences can be." Harry replied, "Yeah, I know exactly what would happen and I seriously don't care. I want a better life." Hermione said, "Good luck then." And she left the house. A few minutes later Harry returned to Aberforth and asked, "What happens if I find my soulmate and somehow Lily has a boy and the past me disappears?" Aberforth replied, "That's simple, you'll become whatever age you were in the past, and you'll be that age once you return. The soulmate is quite interesting, but the problem is that when you arrive in the past you will be 16 and you'll stay 16 until your soulmate is born." Harry was shocked and asked, "You're saying I'll stay 16 until my soulmate arrives? How do I explain why I am not aging?" Aberforth replied, "Simple. Say it's a family curse that when your family hits 16 they have to wait until their soulmate is born to get older." Harry believed Aberforth but was concerned. "Okay, that's believable. Will your brother believe what I said?" Aberforth replied, "No. If you tell the head nurse your story then she'll believe you. Have you been practicing your Latin so the time travel spell works exactly how it's meant to?" Harry replied, "Yes, I've also been practicing occlumency, so if your brother or anyone else tries to read my mind they won't be able to. Plus I have created a mind place to go to if things get bad. It helps me and helps my new photographic memory." Aberforth was very impressed. "That's perfect. You'll be smarter than you ever were and that's going to help you in the past. Have you thought of your new name?" Harry replied, "Yes, I have. My new name is Pablo J. Harrington." Aberforth laughed. "I see what you did there, very funny and believable." Harry said, "Thanks, I'll so have a memory spell to give you when I am in the past so you can help me out." Aberforth said, "Wonderful. Hopefully this time round me and my brother might get along." Harry practiced saying the words lots of times. He asked Aberforth, "Hey Aberforth, am I saying it right? Animenus Junior Tempus Itinerantur. Soulmate time travel younger in English." Aberforth replied, "Yes, perfectly. Okay, I'm ready to give you a magic power boost." Harry asked his last question, "What happens if I don't land in 1945, the year of Dumbledore and Grindelwald fight, but 1936, Tom's first year at Hogwarts?" Aberforth replied, "Well, you got two options. You can give Tom the best life possible and adopt him and make sure he gets to complete his master's in defense so that he'll be a shoo in being the new defense professor." Harry now had a whole new problem. He would be able to adopt, because in London you are legally an adult at 16, and that means Dumbledore won't be able to find Tom and take him to the saws. And he won't have the worst starter years of his life. Harry also asked, "Do you think I should aim for 1925 so I have enough time to adopt Tom?" Aberforth liked this plan a lot. He said, "If you how Dumbledore enough strength, then he might hire you to help defeat Grindelwald." Harry took note of the comment and said, "Okay, I am ready. I got the key to Vault 394 earlier on and I told the goblins it belongs to Pablo J. Harrington." Aberforth asked, "So you've got all your possessions in one vault? Genius. That means you can make the world better than ever before. Have you got a plan for what house you're going to live in?" Harry smiled. "Yeah, I've planned so far ahead it even scares me." Then Harry chanted, "Animenus Junior Tempus Itinerantur," 3 times and disappeared. Harry landed with a thud. He got up and looked around. He was in Diagon Alley. He thought, "Oh my God, perfect place to land," and he searched around for a newspaper. When he found one, it said, "Wednesday the 7th of May 1925. Harry sighed in relief. He thought, "Okay, on to the next step." He walked towards Gringotts Bank and to the front desk and said, "I am Pablo J. Harrington and would like to make a withdrawal from my vault." The goblins looked up to peer at the young man. One goblin asked, "Vault number? And what age are you?" Pablo said, "I am 16 and my vault number is 394. The goblin saw the key and said, "Yes, I see you are Pablo. You inherited this fortune because your parents died." Pablo replied, "Yes, that's correct." The goblin took Pablo to his vault and Pablo looked inside and was glad to see everything he needed was inside. There was a good amount of money and all his books. He was very happy. He said, "Excellent, everything's here. I was wondering, can I buy a small amount of land and an elf to help me out?" The goblin smiled, "Certainly. If you're considering somewhere outside of Hogsmeade, then that's fantastic. There's definitely enough land out there and I have an elf that builds quirky-styled homes. I think he would be perfect. Follow me and we'll sign the papers." Pablo followed the goblin to his office and signed the paperwork, and then the goblin shouted, "Dobby, come here." Pablo couldn't believe his luck. He was super excited and surprised. Dobby appeared. "Yes, goblin sir, how may I help you?" The goblin said, "This is Pablo. He is your new owner." Dobby looked at the wizard and said, "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" Pablo said, "Well, Dobby, I would like to go to Hogsmeade where the trees are and make a wooden shack. I have the designs in my coat pocket." Dobby said, "Yes, master, let's go." They both vanished and reappeared in the right location. Pablo showed the shack's picture to Dobby, who said, "What a creepy creative design. That shouldn't take long. Do you want me to make the interior look pretty to your bloodline but like a complete dump for wizards who aren't?" Pablo said, "Yes, perfect. And an underground to the castle like a secret passageway." Dobby built the shack as quickly as he could. It took a while. He chopped down trees and made sure the shack was in a circle. By the end it looked absolutely stunning. Pablo couldn't believe his eyes. He said, "Well done, Dobby. Can you put my books inside and get some fancy furniture as well? I need to do some errands, but could you take me to Ministry of Magic, please?" Dobby said, "Certainly. Off we go." Harry walked inside the ministry. He saw at reception that it was Minster Folly in charge. He hoped that he was better than Fudge. He went to the reception desk and asked, "Is there a medical wizard about? I just want a full check over, please, to see if I am fit and well enough to adopt someone." The person at reception called for Herbert Spleen. He arrived straight away and said, "You the young G-man who wants to adopt, walk this way and I will help you out." Pablo followed him to his office. He sat on the bed and Herbert asked, "How old are you?" Pablo said, "I am 16 years old, I live by myself. I have an elf who helps me and my parents died when I was younger." Herbert said, "Okay, perfect backstory, but you do have a curse on you. Have you been 16 for a long time?" Pablo replied, "Yeah, 17 years now." Herbert said, "You have a curse that means you stay 16 until your soulmate is born and you have met him or her for the first time." Pablo said, "Wow, that's amazing. Could I have that in writing so when I go to Hogwarts the Medowitch will believe me?" Herbert said, "Certainly, it would be my last pleasure. You said you wanted to adopt. Who is the person you want to adopt?" Pablo said, "He's in a place called Wool's Orphanage. It's in London, I believe. It just has muggles, but I believe there's a wizard there that doesn't know he has magic." Herbert said, "I know that orphanage. It's Mrs. Cole in charge. I will send her a letter and ask if anyone has been doing anything weird." Pablo said, "Thank you so much." Within weeks Mrs. Cole wrote back and said there is indeed a boy there. That's different and needs a special home and she welcomed a visit for an adoption. Pablo thought, perfect, he was very happy. So, his elf transported him straight to the orphanage to meet the woman. Mrs. Cole opened the door and said, "You must be Pablo. Great to meet you." Pablo said, "Wonderful to be here. I would love to meet the boy." Mrs. Cole went to show Pablo the boy's room. The second Mrs. Cole opened the door the boy asked, "Mrs. Cole, what can I do for you?" Mrs. Cole replied, "Well, Mr. Harrington here wants to adopt you." The boy was overwhelmed and said, "Okay, I will talk to him." Alone. Then Mrs. Cole left. She said, "I won't be far." Pablo went over and sat opposite the boy and said, "Hey young man, I am Pablo J. Harrington. I am looking for a younger brother and was hoping it would be you." The boy said, "I am Tom Riddle. What makes you think I would want you?" Pablo replied, "Simple. I think we have things in common. My parents died young and I have a pet snake here." Then a snake appeared and said, "Good evening, young boy." Tom said, "Hello young snake, I hope we can be friends." Pablo also said to the snake, "What do you think of Tom?" The snake said, "He is quite talented." Tom was shocked. He said, "You can talk to snakes? Wow, I thought I was the only one. Okay, I trust you and I'd be happy to be your brother." Pablo said, "Great, let's get out of here." They left the room and orphanage together. Pablo shouted, "Dobby, come here." Then the elf appeared. "Good afternoon, master. Who is this young boy?" Pablo said, "This is my new brother and I am going to look after him for the time being." Tom and Pablo arrived at their home. Pablo showed Tom around the house. Tom loved the look and asked, "Why does the outside look horrible?" Pablo replied, "It's so that if any wizard walked past they wouldn't want to go inside because it looks haunted." Tom understood that. He went to find his room and discovered that it was 4 different colors on the inside. He asked, "Hey Pablo, why is my room 4 colors?" Pablo said, "I don't know what house you're going into at Hogwarts, so I'm giving you the 4 house colors and all the equipment for all your different years. The only thing we both need to get is a wand. Let's go to Ollivander's." They both traveled to Diagon Alley. Tom loved the look of all the shops. Then they came to the wand shop. They opened the door and Mr. Ollivander greeted them, "Come inside." Pablo walked up to Ollivander and said, "Hey, I am Pablo. This is my adopted brother, Tom, and we would like our first wands please." Ollivander said, "Okay Tom, you go first." Tom took the wand and gave it a wave but nothing happened. He tried several until Ollivander handed him a final wand and said, "One last chance." Tom held it and felt bright lighting within himself. He said, "Wow, this feels amazing." Ollivander said, "Excellent. 13.5 inches, Phoenix Feather Core. Very unique wand. I see it'll do great things for you." Pablo thought, typical, oh well, can't change the past too much I suppose. Then it was Pablo's turn. Mr. Ollivander said, "Ah Pablo, you are older than my usual customer. How long have you not a wand for?" Pablo replied, "For a while I guess, but I've managed longer." Ollivander said, "Makes sense. Some wizards don't come into magic until they are 16 or older. Pablo said, explains a lot. Because I didn't know about magic until recently when I received a letter from my parents. Ollivander said, interesting. Okay, I will have a look if there's a specific wand for you. Ollivander searched and found a wand. Pablo gave it a wave but nothing happened. Then, Ollivander had an idea. He said, maybe this is your wand. I accidentally have double of this wand. Ollivander hand. Pablo the wand and a bright light appeared above Pablo's head. Ollivander said, interesting, maybe you and Tom are more brother-like than expected. 11 inches holly and a phoenix feather core as well. Pablo gulped. Wow, that's interesting. Do you have a spare of this specific wand? Ollivander nodded. Yes, I am looking for the other wizard that's supposed to have the other same wand. Pablo said, good luck, I am sure you'll find the wizard. They left the shop and headed to pick up a pet for Tom. He picked a Kneazle, thinking it was a cute cat. Pablo said, a Kneazle is very intelligent. NT cat and can spot an animagus from a distance. Tom said, awesome. I think I will call him Morphin. The Kneazle looked up and seemed to smile. Pablo replied, I think he likes that name. Pablo bought himself an owl. The kind of species that was a true owl. Tom looked at the owl and said, he's so tiny and adorable. Can true owls detect if someone is telling a lie? Pablo laughed, I suppose so. Maybe you can teach him a couple of tricks. Okay, let's go home. A year later, Albus Dumbledore arrived at the Wolves orphanage and asked for Mrs. Cole. She appeared straight away and Albus said, heard you have here a boy with great talent. Mrs. Cole replied, we did, but another person adopted him and they became brothers. Albus couldn't believe his ears. How old was this person? Mrs. Cole said, he was 16, I believe. He's going to your school in September. Albus left straight away and was concerned about who had the child that he was meant to look after and mold into being a great wizard. The 1st of September arrived very fast. Pablo showed him where the train station was and the platform. They went on board and Tom asked, Pablo, why did we travel so far away just to go right back? Pablo replied, well, it would be suspicious if we didn't need to arrive by train. Tom understood that. He was treated like any other first year and so was Pablo. They both arrived at the castle by boat and were greeted by McGonagall. Pablo thought, wow, that's younger McGonagall. She looks great for her age and looks better than when I first meet her. McGonagall said, welcome first years and newcomers. Please go inside and wait to be sorted into your house. The houses are Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Helga Hufflepuff and Rowena Ravenclaw. Treat these houses like you would any family member. Everyone walked inside. Lots of students were first up to sit on the chair and seemed frightened of the talking hat. Tom was fascinated. He said to Pablo, he looks weird. So he reads my mind and picks my house. Pablo nodded. McGonagall said, Riddle, Tom. Tom walked forward and sat on the chair. The Sorting Hat said, interesting mind you have, and a very interesting brother. I can't wait to meet him. But where to put you? I know. Slytherin. Pablo clapped and then a minute later McGonagall said, Harrington, Pablo. Pablo walked forward and sat on the chair. The Sorting Hat was placed on his head and started to talk to Pablo. He said, wow, what a mind. It's fantastic. But you're not a Ravenclaw, because you would exceed them all and be bored quickly. You're not in Hufflepuff because you understand loyal far too much. And you're not in Gryffindor because you have way too much courage for that house. Your cunning is remarkable for a Slytherin and, wait a minute, you are not 16. You are 33. That's why your mind's so powerful and unique. Then the hat said, for the first time in my career this wizard can't be in a house, he needs his own room. Dippet said, impossible, put the hat on my head. The hat was placed on Dippet's head and Dippet asked, why can't Pablo be in a house? The hat said, he may look 16 but he's not. He's more like 33. He's got a family curse. Hat keeps him 16 until his soulmate is born. Dippet was surprised and announced to the school, Mr. Harrington is going to be a teacher aide until I think he's worthy enough to graduate from school. Pablo sat down on a small extra table. Dippet said to Pablo, come to my office, the password is, Nifflers are adorable. A few minutes later Pablo went to Dippet's office and said the password. The Door opened and he went inside. He was shocked to see the difference between Dippet's office and Dumbledore's office. Dippet said, "Ah, Pablo. Glad you could find my office. What do you think of the school?" Pablo said, "Really stunning. It's beautiful and amazing. Your office is quite unique." Dippet replied, "Thanks, I love the office because it changes according to each headmaster's preference. For example, I like magical creatures, so my office contains all the best magical creatures books." Pablo understood now why Dumbledore had lots of defense books, seeing how he was a defense teacher. Pablo asked, "I heard rumors that there's a war going on. Is it true?" Dippet replied, "Yes, it's true. Actually, since you're so talented, would you mind helping Albus champion over Grindelwald?" Pablo said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." Dippet challenged Pablo on all the different charms, potions, transfigurations and dark arts that you're supposed to learn in school. Pablo got everything right, and the school gave Pablo his own room near the Slytherin common room. In the common room, Tom was getting settled in for the night. He was talking with his fellow Slytherin about all the different classes they would be taking. He was looking forward to potions in the morning. Morning arrived early and everyone had breakfast before heading to class. Tom's first class was potions. Professor Slughorn said to Tom, "Where would you find a bazaar?" Tom said, "Inside a goat's stomach, sir." Professor Slughorn was very impressed. Tom was enjoying all the different classes. Then soon enough the winter holidays arrived. During the winter holidays Tom read a lot in the library. He loved defense of the dark arts. Pablo saw Tom in the library and asked, "How are classes going for you?" Tom said, "Great. Professor Dumbledore is really a great teacher. He's always friendly with all the students and concerned about everyone's well-being. I think he might make headmaster one day." Pablo said, "That would be something. If me and him defeat Grindelwald, then maybe we might have a chance." Tom asked, "Really? There's a war going on then? Wow, that's shocking." Pablo smiled at the fact that Tom said that. Pablo asked, "I don't suppose you know how to break a blood pact?" Tom replied, "No, but if I had to do something like that I would put in another person's blood to counteract with the two bloods inside." Pablo's eyes went wide and said, "Tom, you are a genius. Why didn't I think of that?" They both rushed to Dumbledore's office and knocked on the door. Dumbledore allowed them to enter. He said, "Pablo and Tom, what a lovely surprise. What can I do for you?" Pablo said, "Tom is a genius. He solved the blood pact problem." Albus was so relieved. He asked, "Really? What do we need to do?" Tom said, "We need to use someone else's blood to counteract the two bloods in the vial." Dumbledore said, "Brilliant. Then I just need someone who is as AB because I am O and Grindelwald is B-. Pablo said, "We're so lucky I am here right now because I am AB and I am stronger." Dumbledore said, "Wonderful. Let's get started and get rid of this blood pact so I can actually fight Grindelwald." Pablo and Dumbledore did some magic and made the blood pact disappear and exist no more. Dumbledore was so pleased he said, "Now we have a fighting chance. Thank you, Pablo and Tom." Pablo and Tom left the office and went to their rooms. Tom studied some more about why he could talk to snakes and found out that his family goes back to Salazar Slytherin's time. He was shocked and surprised, and he then told his classmates. They were all impressed. One boy said, "That's why the hat put you in Slytherin. He saw your family tree." Tom said, "Yeah, but it doesn't explain why my mother married a Muggle. All of her past family members were pure bloods." One girl said, "Maybe because she was sick of her family's ways and decided to show Muggles are the same as us." Tom never thought of that before and replied, "Thank you." As soon as night time arrived, everyone went to bed. Pablo was staying up and constantly wondering how the war ended and if he can cope with not getting involved in his parents' lives. Dumbledore wrote a letter to Newt saying that a new student and staff member worked out the blood pact and now he can prepare to fight Grindelwald. Newt replied back instantly and said, "Great news. Okay, we need to find a good place to do a showdown. Who's better, Grindelwald or you? We need to prepare interesting news about the new staff member and student that managed to work out the blood pact. I would certainly like to meet them." For the end of first year nothing interesting happened. Then everyone left for the holidays. Dumbledore said to Pablo and Tom, "You two are meeting my good friend Newt in September. I will see you then." Tom and Pablo said their goodbyes and went on their way. They arrived at the train station where Dobby was meeting them. Dobby took them back to the house. Pablo asked, "Did you enjoy first term?" Tom replied, "Yeah, I also found out that I am related to Salazar Slytherin." Pablo was pleasantly surprised and said, "Wow, well done. Did you know there's a secret chamber in the school?" Tom said, "No, awesome. I cannot wait to go back and find it." Pablo said, "Only a true Slytherin can find the chambers." Tom loved the challenge. He went and studied his book, Hogwarts: A History. It was the first book he looked at, so he should have expected to only find the facts he already knew. He asked Pablo, "Why did Salazar hate Muggles and Muggle-born wizards?" Pablo replied, "Well, I think he only liked pure magic. He thought it was wrong to like magic that someone just learned and was not born with." Tom said, "Well, I think that's wrong. If my mother's father wasn't so pure thinking, she wouldn't have been a squib in her older life." Pablo said, "Ah, I see you've been reading the Gaunt family history." Tom said, "Yeah, I asked the librarian if she knew anything about the family of Salazar Slytherin. She told me that the family of the Gaunt would be worth a read." Pablo said, "That's amazing work. When your history professor talks about the founders, you should tell him the information you found out." Tom wrote down everything he found out about the Gaunt family and Salazar Slytherin. The 1st of September arrived quite quickly and Tom was so ready for this year. He was super excited. He met his friends on the train when they arrived and the new first year were sorted into their houses. Dumbledore sent a letter to Pablo and Tom to come to his office. The boys went straight there, and when they went inside they saw another wizard. Pablo said, "You must be Newt. Wonderful to meet you. I am Pablo and this is my brother Tom." Newt replied, "So you are the boys who worked out the blood pact. Wonderful job. By the way," Tom asked, "do you think Grindelwald has figured it out yet?" Newt replied, "He probably has, so we'd better get preparations in order." In the castle in Austria, Grindelwald was doing preparations of his own for his next speech on how war was coming sooner rather than later. Vinda, Rosier, was looking at Grindelwald, then she noticed something different. She said, "Master, I believe your pendant has been stolen." Grindelwald looked down at his clothes and panicked when he saw his blood pact wasn't on him. He said, "No, oh, that bad Niffler must have stolen it during my last ceremony. Now Dumbledore has the upper hand." Vinda said, "What should we do?" Grindelwald said, "Well, I am going to send something to Dumbledore as a warning." During the winter holidays Tom searched and searched for the hidden entrance. He did extremely well in his history lesson. His teacher was shocked to know that Tom is a late descendant of Salazar Slytherin. He rushed to tell Headmaster Dippet and Dippet was shocked. He told Dumbledore and Dumbledore said, "I told that boy is special." Dippet replied, "Do you think he's after your teaching job?" Dumbledore said, "If he is I would welcome him, but test him on how he would teach the students. See if he's just like Salazar Slytherin and prejudiced against Muggles." Dippet said, "If he's anything like his mother or ancestors, then I might have to make sure that he is on our side." When Hogwarts started again, Tom had a weird idea where to look for the mysterious dungeon. He went into an old toilet, looked around a sink and found a snake. He said, "Opened." In Parseltongue, and a ladder opened and he climbed down the ladder and saw a dusty area. He wandered around and found a 5-snake doorway. He said, "Open, let me entrance." The huge door swung right open and a huge snake appeared. He said, "Who are you?" "You not Salazar, my owner." Tom gulped and said, "I am Salazar, great-grandson. My name Tom. What's your name?" The snake was most impressed and said, "I am Mortadolv, my young friend." Tom replied, "Cool, can I call Mort for short?" The snake nodded. Tom looked around the place and headed back to his room. He found Pablo and said, "I found the chamber and there's a huge basilisk in there. His name is Mortadolv. I call him Mort for short." Pablo laughed quietly and said, "Well done, Tom. I'd like to meet this basilisk. He sounds interesting." Pablo and Tom went to the chambers. Tom showed the entrance and the stairs leading down and the snake door. Pablo didn't know about the stairs. He asked, "How did you get the stairs to appear?" Tom said, "I said stairs in Parseltongue and they appeared." Pablo was surprised how easy that was and was annoyed why he didn't think of that. They walked Through the door and the basilisks was waiting on them, he said, "Who is the new visitor?" Tom said, "He's my brother and guardian, he rescued me." Pablo said, "Nice to meet you, Mort." The snake was impressed, he replied, "Wow, another speaker, wonderful to meet you as well." All three chatted for some time, then Pablo and Tom went to their rooms. Tom talked to his friends about the secret chambers. One Slytherin was very interested. Everyone went to sleep except one Slytherin, who stayed awake and wrote to his father. The father told Grindelwald he was very surprised about the hidden chamber. He needed to investigate. It was end of the year, everyone went on the train to go home. This might not be in the right year, but I need it to happen sooner than later in the story. Throughout the summer, Grindelwald was secretly practicing how to talk to snakes if the rumors were true that real live basilisk was living under Hogwarts and it can only be controlled by Parseltongue. Imagine the army he could build. Grindelwald searched for the Gaunt family tree to see if there's a quicker way to speak the ancient language. He came across an old member called Morfin Gwant. Grindelwald knocked on the door. Morfin allowed him in. He asked, "What do you want?" Grindelwald said, "Ah, you do know me good. I want to know how to speak Parseltongue." Morfin laughed. "Only a Gaunt member can speak our language, but this locket will help you." Grindelwald said, "Thanks, what's the catch of taking this locket?" Morfin said, "There's a Muggleborn in the school and my cousin is there as well. The Gaunt family hates Muggleborns." Grindelwald nodded. "Sounds like fun." Tom's third year was very interesting. He met a half-giant in Diagon Alley saying he's starting Hogwarts this year. The giant's name was Rubeus Hagrid. Pablo was really impressed. He said, "Wonderful to meet you, I am Pablo, the teacher's aide." Rubeus said, "Thanks, I am awfully excited. My parents were so proud that I got a letter." Tom said, "You are going to love it. I got a huge snake as a friend, I have been teaching him how to behave." Rubeus said, "Wow, I kinda don't like snakes, but I love spiders, they are amazing." Tom said, "There's a pet shop nearby, maybe I could buy you a spider as a pet." Pablo was speechless by what Tom offered for Rubeus. He smiled and said, "What a wonderful suggestion, let's buy him one." Rubeus, Tom and Pablo went into the pet shop and bought Rubeus an acromantula. The shop owner said that he'll grow big and strong. Rubeus named him Aragog. Pablo was shocked by how tiny and cute this spider was and knew if his friend Ron was here he would be freaking out. Everyone headed home. On the train ride, Tom was looking at how the defensive spell can help and work in a pinch at battles. A spell called Expelliarmus was very useful spell. The first years got sorted. Rubeus was sorted into Slytherin. Pablo was surprised, and another surprise was that Dumbledore wasn't going to be taking deference this year. As a temporary staff member called Professor Garrett Bagshot. He was an interesting person. Pablo thought he must be related to Bathilda Bagshot, which was great. He was curious of him. Tom couldn't wait to see how he does his classes. Professor Bagshot's classes were a lot similar to Dumbledore's classes, which Tom liked the most. The professor said, "Tom, wait after class." Tom did as he told. He asked, "Why am I here, sir?" Bagshot said, "Well, I think you have potential and related to the Gaunt family, they are amazing members." Tom said, "You know my family, wow, cool, how do you know them?" Bagshot saw it. "Well, I met one called Morfin, he said that Muggleborns are the problem and a basilisks can solve the problem." Tom asked, "Can you speak Parseltongue?" Professor Bagshot replied, "Yeah, I have learned it quite quickly, and was wondering where the chamber is." Tom said, "I cannot tell you, because you need to find it yourself if you want to find the chambers." Professor Bagshot asked one more question, "What do you think of Muggleborns?" Tom replied, "I think they are just like any other wizard. I see nothing wrong with them." Professor Bagshot smiled at that comment and said, "See you after the holidays." Tom said, "Good luck and goodbye, and see you after the winter holidays." During the whole winter, Professor Bagshot tried his hardest to find the chamber, but he had no luck. He watched Tom going out of an old girl's toilet, so he decided to go after Tom. He looked around and saw a strange tap with a snake on it. He thought clever old Salazar hiding it in plain sight. He put on the locket and said open in Parseltongue and managed it perfectly, and was shocked that a hole opened up with stairs. He walked downstairs and saw small corridors and saw a big door with 5 snakes and said open. In parcel tongue again and the door opened, a huge snake appeared and said, "Who are you?" Professor Bagshot said, "I am Garrett Bagshot." The basilisk saw the locket and said, "You know my owner?" Bagshot replied, "Yeah, he's a friend of mine." The basilisks used his tongue and sensed that he wasn't related to Slytherin but an imposter in disguise and said, "You are not Bagshot, you are the legend wizard Grindelwald. Why have you come here?" Bagshot replied, "Because you great-grandson doesn't want to kill Muggle-borns, he thinks they are like every other wizard." The basilisk yelled, "What? How dare he? Let's kill a Muggle-born and blame him." Bagshot loved that idea. Luckily there was a Muggle-born called Riddle who was walking inside the toilet. Bagshot told the basilisk and the basilisk headed Hatway and went up the pipes and gave her a fright. She died instantly. Dippet came running when he heard a scream and saw a student dead with Bagshot next to her. He asked, "What happened?" Bagshot's aide, "The rumors are true, there's a basilisks in the castle." Dippet said, "You can't speak basilisk, only Tom can speak snake tongue." Dippet summoned Tom and he arrived and saw the dead girl. He was shocked. He asked, "What's going on here?" Dippet said, "A basilisk has killed the girl." Tom was shocked and saw Bagshot. He saw that Bagshot was wearing a locket and said, "I didn't lose the basilisk." Professor Bagshot did, he's wearing my family locket. Dippet looked at Bagshot and saw that he was wearing a locket. Pablo was at his family house during the holidays. He went and found Bathilda Bash. OT and asked, "Did you have a son called Garrett Bagshot?" She replied, "No, the only family member I have is Gelbert Grindelwald. He my distant cousin, which I wish he wasn't." Pablo was shocked. That means Garrett's is a phony. He rushed back to school and went through his secret passageways. He was going back to his room when he saw Dippet, Tom and Bagshot outside the girls' toilet. He walked over there and asked, "What's going on here?" Dippet said, "A student has been killed by a basilisk." He said, "It wasn't Tom, I think it was Bagshot and he's a traitor." Dippet said, "Really, why do you believe that?" Pablo said, "I went to a woman named Bathilda Bagshot and the only relation she has is Gelbert Grindelwald." Bagshot looked really nervous and his potion just run out and appeared as Grindelwald. He said, "Well done Pablo, the first will have to keep a closer eye on you." Grindelwald disappeared instantly. Dippet said, "Thank you Pablo, you have saved the day." Tom said, "I think I know how Grindelwald convinced the basilisk. I told him that Muggleborns aren't so different." Dippet and Pablo were shocked. Dippet said, "Well, if you have that opinion you might make a great professor one day." Dumbledore appeared and asked, "What did I miss?" Pablo said, "Grindelwald was the spare sub-teacher and managed to convince a basilisk to kill a student." Dumbledore was so shocked, and even more surprised about Tom's opinions about Muggleborns. The next couple days weren't any more interesting and so end of year arrived and everyone went home. During Tom's 4th year he got to know Professor Slughorn really well and started to ask questions about being a teacher. Slughorn was very grateful about the questions and asked one question, "Do you think Dippet would hire you as a teacher?" Tom thought for a moment and said, "Yeah, definitely. I think if I show him my year plan for 1st year to 6th year to learn, then yeah, I think he would like it." Slughorn asked, "What would be your understanding about Muggleborn students?" Tom replied, "I think it needs to be taught more. I mean, did you know that a half-blood or full-blood students get information about the school and an idea how to find each classroom?" Slughorn said, "No, I didn't know that. How interesting. How would you sort that problem?" Quote. Tom replied, "Simple. I would give the Muggleborn and their parents a private tour of the building before term even started." Slughorn gasped at that reply. He said, "Wow, that's incredible idea. You should tell Dippet that idea right away." They both marched to the headmaster's office and waited to enter and the Gargle let them enter. Slughorn and Tom sat on a couch and Dippet asked, "What are you two doing here?" Slughorn said, "Well, Tom here has a wonderful idea for Muggleborn student." Dippet was very interested and said, "Tom, could you please tell me your idea?" Tom said, "Well, my suggestion is, since half and full blood get a leaflet about the school and Muggleborn have to wait until they arrive at school, I was wondering if there's a way for the new Muggleborn student and parents come to the school and have a tour and show where the classes for a first year would be. Dippet loved that idea. That is brilliant. What a terrific idea. Dippet Fire called Dumbledore and he arrived straight away and saw Slughorn and Tom in the headmaster's office. He asked, "What are Tom and Slughorn doing here?" Dippet said, "Well, Tom here gave the best idea to sort out our Mugglenorn getting lost between classes." Dumbledore said, "Okay, explain to me." Tom explained his idea and how great it could work. Dumbledore absolutely loved that idea and said, "Once the war is over I will get straight on that and put that idea into motion." During the winter holidays Tom studied about Dementors and how to protect themselves. He asked Pablo, "Why don't Patronus Charm be taught at Hogwarts?" Pablo said, "I haven't got a clue, it would be useful and you need your happiest memory. Maybe you should suggest it to Dumbledore." Tom walked over to Dumbledore's office and went inside. He asked, "Why is the Patronus Charm not taught at Hogwarts?" Dumbledore said, "I don't know, what a great suggestion. Fine, during your second half of 5th year we going to practice that spell." Tom bravely asked, "What about first half, sir?" Dumbledore said, "That would be a boggart." Tom gulped and read about them and said, "Great, Hats one class one won't be looking forward to." The winter holidays finished and end of term arrived and everyone went home. Tom's 5th year was very exciting, but he was super nervous. Pablo said, "What's wrong?" Tom said, "I studied all about boggarts and understand them and thinking of what my boggart could be, but I can't think of nothing." Pablo said, "Well, that's understandable, boggarts find your deepest memory that you want to hide even if you cannot think of it." Tom was surprised at what Pablo said and now was worried. Did he suppress a memory that he never thought in before? He was on the train and trying to think back about every memory and nothing came to mind. When they arrived he asked his classmates if they had a memory that scared them. One boy said, "Yeah, I am scared of heights." One girl said, "My parents dying during the war." Tom asked, "I cannot think of any suppressed memory that haunts me." One boy said, "Maybe you blocked it out, that even you can't think of it." Tom liked that answer and decided to dream and see if any nightmares would come to surface. During nighttime everyone slept and Tom had no nightmares, just pleasant dreams. In the morning everyone went to have breakfast. After that it was Dumbledore's class. He said, "In this cupboard is a boggart. I hope everyone is practicing their spells." All the class nodded. Tom's friends went first. One student turned her fear into something fun. Another student turned his fear into something super funny. Everyone laughed to pieces. Then it was Tom's turn. He walked while the boggart was changing into Tom's fear. It was so far in his mind that when it surfaced he couldn't believe what it was. When the memory arrived, it was during orphanage he got picked on being different. Dumbledore sensed the memory was too painful. So he stepped forward and showed a memory of him and Grindelwald being friends. Then he shouted, "Ridiculous." The memory faded away and turned into Dumbledore being a phoenix. He said, "Class dismissed. Tom, please stay after." Everyone left and Tom stayed behind. Dumbledore walked over to the boy and asked, "I guess that was a memory you weren't expecting." Tom replied, "I don't even remember that memory." Dumbledore asked, "Can I do a simple spell on you?" Tom replied, "I don't see what's the harm. Go ahead." Dumbledore did the spell and found out something very interesting and returned back to normal. He said, "Wow, Tom, you are more powerful than I expected. You managed at a young age to obliviate your own mind of that terrible event." Tom couldn't believe his ears. "Wow. You mean to say, I did an advanced spell at a young age?" Dumbledore nodded and said, "See you after the holidays." Tom left the classroom and had lunch, then had a short transfiguration class and then the winter holidays arrived. During the winter holidays Tom told Pablo what he managed to do as a young kid. Pablo was surprised and asked, "Have you tried the Patronus charm yet?" Tom replied, "Not yet. What's the charm again?" Pablo said, "Expecto Patrum." Tom said the words without his wand and surprisingly a cobra came and sat on his shoulder. Pablo nearly fainted. He said, "Tom, that's impressive, well done." Tom looked at the cobra sitting on his shoulder. He smiled. "I cannot believe what I just did, Dumbledore going to be super impressed." Pablo laughed. Yeah, try and not make him faint please, but if you do tell me right away. Tom said. Sure, I can do that. Classes returned straight away. Dumbledore said. I hope everyone is practicing the charm. The whole class nodded. One by one everyone had a go, some were successful. Then Tom had a go and said the charm and a cobra appeared and sat on his shoulder. Dumbledore said. Well done Tom, that's impressive. Tom said. Yeah, but I can do something better. Dumbledore and the whole class wanted to know. Then Tom did the charm without a wand and the cobra appeared again. Everyone clapped with excitement. Dumbledore was so shocked that he did faint for a second and said, Wow. Not even 6th-year students can do that. I think you're going to make a terrific teacher. Class was over and Tom did other classes. Then it was end of term and everyone went on the train to go home. In Austria Grindelwald was planning his next attack. One of his servants said, You need to get back at Pablo. I think you should do the Latin curse that is banned. Grindelwald said, I would go straight to Azkaban, but at least I would have my revenge on Pablo. Yes, I will do the curse. Tom's last year was a very short year because Grindelwald started to attack the school and said, You brave pure blood, students follow me because Muggle War was coming and I needed fighters. Dumbledore was furious and said, Students don't follow this madman. Grindelwald wasn't pleased one bit. He said, You and Pablo fight me in the courtyard and see which one is more powerful. Dumbledore said, Follow my lead and I'll protect you. Pablo replied, Don't worry, I won't get hurt. I promise. Dumbledore and Pablo went to courtyard. Pablo said, If we get his wand then he'll be powerless. Dumbledore agreed upon arrival. Grindelwald was first to use spell Stupid Fee and knocked Pablo off his feet. Dumbledore said, Confringo, and blasted Grindelwald further back. Grindelwald attacked with Crucio. It bounced off Dumbledore and hit Pablo. He was in pain all over. Dumbledore did healing spell and stopped the curse. Pablo was better and said, Let's finish this. Grindelwald was going to say, Avada Kedavra, and was hitting Dumbledore. He quickly used Expelliarmus and Grindelwald wand flew out of his hand and landed on Dumbledore's hand. The big spell missed Grindelwald. He used a spare wand and cursed Pablo and said, Masculum Gravita Soulmate. Pablo was surprised and never heard about that spell. Dumbledore was about to kill Grindelwald for saying that spell. A whole lot of Aurora appeared and took Grindelwald away. The head Aura said, Everything okay? Dumbledore said, No. Grindelwald said a bad curse to Pablo. I want him receive Dementor's kiss for the spell he used. The Aura asked, What spell did he use? Dumbledore whispered, What would happen to Pablo? The Aura was really shocked and said, Yes. Grindelwald will be receiving the Dementor's kiss. Pablo was super confused and asked, What's so bad about the spell? Dumbledore said, After we've been to the medical nurse to see if we are all healthy. Grindelwald was taken away and was sent to Azkaban. Pablo and Dumbledore went to seek Hogwarts medical witch. When they arrived at the hospital wing, the matron who was called Madame Strout was on scene. She had an assistant called Madame Pomfrey, who was taken over when Madame Strout retired. They accessed Dumbledore first and gave him a clean bill of health. Then they came to Pablo. He was worried. Madame Strout said, He looks fine. I don't see anything wrong with him. Dumbledore said, He was struck by an old curse. Madame Strout said, What curse would that be? Dumbledore said, It was the Masculum Gravita Soulmate curse. Madame Strout gulped and said, You poor thing. Pablo demanded, What's going on? What's so bad about that curse? Strout said, That curse means in English male pregnant soulmate curse. It means later in life you and your soulmate are going to be with child. Pablo fainted for quite some time when he recovered. He said, That's going to seriously complicate things so much, because I am not supposed to age until I meet my soulmate, plus if that's the curse it means I won't be showing until my soulmate turns 16. Dumbledore said, Is that why you always look nervous when the first-year students arrive? Pablo nodded. To make matters worse I cannot tell my soulmate until he turns 16. Dumbledore was really shocked and surprised about the current events that just taken place. Dippet arrived very quickly. He asked, How did the battle go? Pablo said, Grindelwald in Azkaban now, and he put an ancient Latin curse on me. Dippet was interested in the curse. Dumbledore explained everything that happened, and now he has a wand as well as the curse. Dippet was astonished that Grindelwald would do that awful curse just to get revenge. Dippet said, I think you, Dumbledore, will get the Merlin First Class Award, and you will take over my job when I retire next year. Dumbledore was speechless and said, Thank you so much, sir. I don't know what to say. Tom heard about all the commotion and asked, What's wrong with Pablo? Madame Strout said, He was hit by an ancient Latin curse and will be expecting a child when his soulmate turns 16. Tom was surprised and shocked and asked, The war is over, right? Dippet nodded. Yes, but the school will need to be prepared, and in 2 years' time. I want to see if you qualify to be the new defense teacher. Tom gulped and said, I won't let you down, headmaster. For the next 2 years Pablo and Tom practiced everything they knew about defense against the dark arts. Pablo asked questions about how to steer children away from the dark side and how not to use these spells on a non-defensive wizard. He even taught him how to use wandless magic as well. Pablo brought an aura to visit Tom and teach spells as well. The aura taught some non-academic spells as well as how to disparate, which took Tom a matter of seconds to learn properly. He got his license quite quickly. The aura even taught him what his animagus was. To Pablo's surprise, it was a Komodo dragon lizard, which shocked Pablo and the aura. When Tom returned, he asked, Why are you shocked? The aura said, Your animagus is a Komodo dragon, which is quite rare, and I was surprised. Because I thought you might be an anaconda snake. Tom asked, But the cobra is my patronus, I thought I might be that instead. Pablo said, Well, you have a rare patronus and an even rarer animagus. Tom smiled. Ollivander was right about me having an amazing gift. Exactly 2 years have passed and now Tom was on the train going to Hogwarts for an interview. Tom asked Pablo, Do you think I am ready? Pablo said, Definitely. We have practiced so much and you have learned the basics in wandless magic, which is impossible and important. When they arrived at Hogwarts, they both went to the headmaster's office. Dippet and Dumbledore were there. Tom and Pablo sat down and Dippet was the first to ask the question. What have you learned the past 2 years? Tom replied, I learned a lot. I learned basic wandless spells, I got my dissiparation incense, and I found out my animagus as well. Dumbledore was impressed. He asked, What is your animagus? Tom gulped and said the spell that turned him into a Komodo dragon, which shocked Dippet and Dumbledore. Pablo just smiled when Tom reappeared as a normal wizard. Dippet said, Your animagus is a Komodo dragon. You do realize how rare these creatures are. Did you know that means in the future you can turn into multiple different lizards and snakes? Tom replied, No, I didn't realize that. Me and Pablo did wonder why we got an animagus certificate with multiple animagus on it. Pablo was speechless and he thought of the time he was at the zoo with his cousins and then thought the snake could have been Tom, and he didn't even know that, and maybe the snake got killed and that's why Tom attached himself to the nearest wizard and it was Quirrell. Dumbledore said, I think you're going to make a wonderful professor. I would like to view how you take your classes for 3 years. Tom said, I am 18 at the moment, can I wait until I am 21 and then teach my first year's class? Dumbledore liked that idea very much and Dippet said, That's perfect. Because then it will be 1960 and Tom will do his 3 years and then it'll be 1963 and Dumbledore needs 2 years of practice being headmaster before I retire in 1965. Tom loved that plan. Pablo also said, I will help Tom for 5 years before I am sure he's confident on his own. 1960 came very quickly. Tom planned everything perfectly and was ready for the first-year students. All first-year students sat at the desk and Tom said, Hey, I am Professor Riddle and I will be your defense teacher. One student said, You look very young for a teacher. Tom smiled and replied, Well, I am 21 years old and 10 years ago I was sitting where you are sitting. The student really liked the answer and so did Dumbledore. Tom taught classes for the different years. The 3 years were also special and the 3 years went really quickly. Tom kept making Dumbledore smile and Pablo was shocked at how good he was with the students and how he treated every type of witch or wizard the same. He didn't care about their family background. Tom taught Regulus Black, which was something special for Pablo. He was thinking about how in a couple of years' time his parents, and a group of wizards called Marauders, would be coming to school, and he got quite excited. This time round Professor Slughorn actually got a picture taken with Regulus Black, and he hoped to complete the set when Regulus said, "In 6 years my little brother will be starting Hogwarts. I hope you'll be teaching still." Professor Slughorn said, "Don't worry, I won't be retiring soon." Pablo was also worried because the whopping willow tree was fully grown, which meant in 6 years Remus Lupin will be starting Hogwarts, and Pablo was worried because his dad was part of the group and might see the Shrieking Shack different from his group of friends, or taking Lily to the place and both of them seeing different places from normal wizards. He never thought of that being a problem because he was hoping once Tom got his job he would just stay at home until James and Lily gave birth to him, but now he's got a curse, which makes him stay in the school until a certain student turns 16. Dumbledore's 2 years of getting used to being headmaster were thrilling, and he was extremely excited. Dumbledore did everything perfectly, and a phoenix decided to be friends with the new headmaster, which shocked Dippet. He said, "Yes, this school is in good hands. Enjoy being headmaster." Dippet went home and enjoyed his retirement. In 1965, when Dumbledore started his job, he did a speech to the new students about the school and who the staff members were. Everything went normal and nothing interesting happened until the year 1970, where Dumbledore heard about a young witch Muggleborn and decided she would be the perfect candidate for a tour around Hogwarts. Dumbledore went to meet her and her family. He knocked on the door, and Mrs. Evans opened the door, and Dumbledore said, "Good afternoon, my name is Albus Dumbledore and I believe one of your daughters does special things." Mrs. Evans said, "Of course, please come inside." Dumbledore moved inside and sat on the couch. Mrs. Evans got her husband and her 2 daughters. All 4 walked inside and sat on the couch. Dumbledore asked, "Which one of you is Lily?" Lily put her hand up and said, "I am." Dumbledore smiled and said, "Excellent. I am starting a new program for you because in my world you are a Muggleborn, which means you do magic that your other family members can't do, only you can. And it's my job to show you the school and give you a tour and show you where to get your school supplies and teach you how to change your money into our money." Lily was super excited. Petunia asked, "Would the whole family get to visit your school so we can all know where my sister is going to school?" Dumbledore nodded. "Yes, everyone is getting this experience." Dumbledore sighed his goodbyes and said, "Expect me in August." Dumbledore walked outside and went back to the school. 3 months later Dumbledore arrived at the house again and took the family to Diagon Alley to G.E.T. school supplies, and then went to the platform and explained where the wall was to walk through. It was 9 3/4 and they went on the Hogwarts train, and when they arrived he showed them where the boat was for first years and where to pick up the carriages to Hogwarts when you're in 2nd to 6th year. The Evans were shocked at how beautiful the castle was and how well the students got treated. Dumbledore showed them the main hall and explained about the sorting hat and told them how it tells each student what their house is. Then Dumbledore introduced them to all the teachers. When they came to Pablo, the Evans were interested. Lily asked, "Dumbledore, Pablo here looks only 16, how can he be a staff member?" Dumbledore laughed and said, "All the students ask the same question, which is why during my speech I say Pablo J. Harrington might look young but he's older than he looks. He's had a family curse." Pablo smiled and said, "Yeah, I have been 16 for 61 years now, which is amazing." Dumbledore gasped and said, "You've been 16 for that many years? I didn't even realize. That's amazing." Petunia liked every minute of it and pictured everything perfectly and had a notebook written down with all the things that Lily would be learning. Pablo had to hold back when cuddling Lily and not laughing at how different Petunia was. This has been her drive for ages, and he couldn't wait for the following year. In 1971 Pablo was super excited. He knew his parents would be coming to Hogwarts as well as his potions teacher, Professor Severus Snape, which got him super excited. He got up early and asked Professor Slughorn if he could come teach the first-year potion class. Professor Slughorn accepted and didn't ask questions as to why he wanted to teach them. All the first-year students went in the main hall. Lily was super excited. She loved the boat and it was exactly how she pictured the boat ride, and the sorting hat was a funny-looking hat. McGonagall did her speech about the different houses. Sirius Black was first. He got Gryffindor. Next was Remus Lupin. He got Gryffindor. Lucius Malfoy got Slytherin. Narcissa Black got Slytherin. James Potter got Gryffindor. Lily Evan got Gryffindor as well as Peter Pettigrew, and last was Severus Snape, who got Slytherin. Pablo was pleased that everyone got the right house and no one got the wrong house. Dumbledore said, "Dinner is served." Severus had a shudder all down his body and he decided to ask an older boy, who was the young boy sitting next to Professor Riddle. The older boy said, "That's Pablo. He has a curse which means he cannot get older. I believe he's been like that for 62 years. Now." Pablo saw Severus shuddering when he looked this way and did a small laugh. He thought, "Great. Don't say it's bloody Severus Snape or I am seriously going to have a conversation with Dumbledore's brother." The ceremony was over and the students went back to their dorms and staff went to their classrooms. Tom could see how nervous Pablo was, so he asked, "Hey brother, you okay? You don't look so good." Pablo said, "Yeah, just can't believe the first years who started this year." Tom did a non-verbal spell and checked Pablo and was shocked and said, "Hey bro, I hate to say this but you're not 16 anymore, you are 17. Pablo shouted, "What you have got to be kidding me?" Tom said, "No bro, I am not kidding you on. I am sorry." Pablo said, "Okay, I will tell Dumbledore after my class." Tom asked, "Can I come along? I wanted to know if he is going to be shocked or not." Pablo replied, "Sure, that's perfectly fine with me." All staff and students went to bed and in the morning everyone had breakfast and the first years went to potion class. They were waiting for the professor. Then Pablo walked inside saying, "There will be no foolish wand waving or silly incantations in this class. As such, I don't expect many of you to appreciate the subtle science of the potion making. However, for those of you who possess the predisposition, I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to brew glory, bottle fame, and even put a stopper in death. Then again, maybe some of you have come to Hogwarts in possession of abilities so formidable that you feel comfortable enough to not pay attention." Pablo looked at Snape and saw he was writing everything down and Pablo said, "Mr. Snape is our new potion expert. I heard your mum's a potion master, so I will ask 3 questions. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Where would you look if I told you to find me a bazaar? And last one, what is the difference, Snape, between monkshood and wolfsbane?" Snape thought for a moment and said, "For your information, Sir, asphodel and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the draught of living death. A bazaar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat and it will save you from most poisons. As for monkshood and wolfsbane, they are the same plant, which also goes by the name of aconite." Pablo clapped and said, "Well done Mr. Snape, 15 points to Slytherin." Lily asked, "Professor, the first question you asked Severus, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Pablo replied, "Yes, that was the question, what about it?" Lily said, "I have been reading different meanings of each item. I have read according to Victorian flower language, asphodel is a type of lily meaning, my regrets follow you to the grave, and wormwood means absence, and also typically symbolized bitter sorrow. If you combine that, it meant, I bitterly regret Lily's death." Pablo was shocked that Lily would have worked that out and he said, "Well done Lily, your house will get 10 points. I hope everyone has been writing everything down." The whole class wrote everything down and the class was finished. All the first year students enjoyed the different classes. Lily and James really enjoyed defense class. During lunch break, Pablo and Tom headed to the headmaster's office and said the password and walked inside. They saw Dumbledore at the table. Dumbledore looked up and asked, "Pablo and Tom, what can I do for you boys today?" Pablo nervously said, "Well, Tom did a non-verbal age spell on me today and found out that I am no longer 16 but 17. Dumbledore was shocked and surprised and said, "Oh my gosh, it's one of this year's first-year students, oh how wonderful." Then, suddenly Professor Slughorn came bounding in and yelled, "Pablo, what did you do to the first-year students? They somehow frightened of my class now." Pablo laughed and felt guilty and said, "I gave a student 3 questions and my entrance somehow gave everyone a shock." Professor Slughorn, "You definitely shocked the Gryffindor boy James. He nearly jumped out his skin when I walked in the classroom. Pablo laughed some more and said, I just said 3 questions to Mr. Snape. Because I know his mother is a potion master. Professor Slughorn. Oh, I know his mother, her name Eileen Prince. She married a muggle called Tobias Snape. She even wrote a book which I have been studying. Pablo asked, can I see this book? Professor Slughorn handed the book and Pablo began to read, and the first 3 questions were the exact same questions he said to Mr. Snape. He was shocked and Nnoyed and said, These are the first 3 questions I asked Mr. Snape, and that's why he got them all right. Dumbledore and Tom picked up on how Pablo kept saying Mr. Snape and decided to ask when Professor Slughorn left. A wee while later Professor Slughorn did leave, so Tom asked the question, Bro, is your soulmate Mr. Snape? Pablo looked at Tom and Dumbledore and said, yeah, he is. I was shocked and I still can't understand why. A few weeks later winter holidays started. During the winter period James and his friends were enjoying their break. They studied a lot, then found a secret doorway and a ladder going to the basement. James asked Dumbledore, why is there a secret basement? Dumbledore said, I see you found my extra training class. It's to test your knowledge of the classes you attended. James loved the challenge and told his friends, and they all decided to do the challenge. The first room was a potion puzzle. On the board it said, which one of these objects will save you from poison? Lucky Sirius was paying attention in class, even though it was funny that the wizard they thought they wouldn't get along with, so Cyrus picked up the goat's stomach and said, this, A.B. Azor, it will save you from the most poisons. The door opened and they all walked inside the next room, which had a lot of keys and a broom. James said, this is a flying competition. Luckily my dad and me practice all the time. James went on the broom and flew around finding the old key and opening the door. All 4 walked through and found another board. It said, how do I bring this book towards me? Remus said, that's easy, Accio book. The book landed on Remus' hand and the door magically opened. They walked through and Peter said, I guess it's my go next. They opened the door and it was a transfigurations question. It said, how do I turn this rat into a goblet? Peter gulped and said, Vera Verto, I believe the incantation. The rat turned into a goblet and the door opened and they all head outside to see they were back where they started. All the puzzles and Dumbledore were there and he said, well done everyone, you have passed the test. Remus and Cyrus were so happy. James asked Peter, are you scared of rats? Peter said, no, I come from a family whose animagus are in the rodent family. James said, awesome, that means you might be a mouse or rat when you change into your animagus. Peter said, maybe that's a good thing, but how did the person who makes the rooms know about my family history? James said, that's just a mystery we have to work out together. All the other first years did the puzzle rooms and they all passed. Then it was the end of school year and everyone went home. During the holidays Lily told her family about her first year and how she made friends. Her parents were so proud. Petunia was still interested in the school and enjoyed her normal school and made friends as well. James and his friends liked to stay in contact. They enjoyed each other's company. It was September and everyone went on the train and headed to Hogwarts. After the first ceremony everyone had dinner and went to bed. The second year's first class was History of Magic, where they learned about the founders of the school. Lucius and Severus were very interested in Salazar Slytherin and they asked the professor for more information, but the professor said, it's best to ask Tom as he's a late descent of Salazar Slytherin. Quote, Severus and Tom were shocked and so were the rest of the class, and so after class finished, Lucius and Severus went straight to Tom's class and both asked, Professor, sir, is it true that you related to a founder of Salazar Slytherin? Tom replied, yes, unfortunately I am, but I don't believe in his ways of teaching. Severus asked, why don't you believe in his way? Tom sighed and said, well, my mother hated her brothers and when they went to Azkaban she decided to do something a Slytherin wouldn't do, which was to marry a Muggle. The Muggle was my father, but he never loved my mother. Because he was under a love potion and so I was conceived under a love potion, and my father wanted nothing to do with me and my mother's family didn't want anything to do with her, so she went to an orphanage where she gave birth to me and some years later died of a broken heart, I believe. Lucius was shocked at this news. He said, is that why every so often a Muggleborn turns up in Slytherin? Tom replied, Yeah, I want all Slytherin to treat each house fairly and equal. When Lucius and Severus left, they had lots of thoughts in their heads and decided to try and get along with all houses. Then winter holidays started. Throughout the winter, Lucius and Severus wanted more information about the Chamber of Secrets, but they knew they needed to learn snake language. Lucius said, I think Professor Riddle said the language is Parseltongue and he and Professor Harrington only speak it. Severus said, that's weird, Riddle and Harrington aren't related, how do they both speak it? Lucius said, wow, you are smart, maybe we should ask him. Severus was shy. He replied, yeah, good idea, but Harrington is really strict with me and he scares me. Lucius laughed and said, okay, I will ask, see you soon. Lucius went outside and found Professor Harrington's office and knocked on the door. The professor allowed him access and asked, Mr. Malfoy, what can I do for you at this late hour? Lucius asked, I was wondering, how are you a Parseltongue? If you're not related to Professor Riddle. Pablo said, good question. A thing happened to me when I was younger. My parents met an evil wizard and was killed. I was an infant at the time. My mother did an amazing spell so I wouldn't get hurt, and for some reason the evil wizard was a Parselmouth and passed his powers on to me when he killed my parents. Lucius said, you mean when the killing curse bounced and didn't kill you, part of the evil wizard power got transferred into you? Pablo replied, yeah, that's the story. Lucius was shocked and surprised and said, thank you, sir, that was helpful. Lucius left and went back to his dorm room and told the story to Severus. When the story finished, Severus was so shocked and NTLY had an idea. He said, maybe if we get a snake's blood and mix it in the calderon and drink it, we would have the same powers. Lucius said, brilliant idea, and you're amazing at potions, can we make it? The boys went to the library and studied. Lucius looked at the book about different snakes. Severus was more interested in potions with snakes. Ingredients. The librarian said, interesting choice in books. Not many students have worked out Salazar gifts. If it's because of a potion, then you might have done something no second year has tempted. Severus was shocked at the librarian comment and said, thank you, I will tell you if we solve it. The boys practiced the whole winter reading and getting ingredients. Then on the final day when students returned, they finished the potion. Severus was so nervous. Lucius said, if this works, I think your future job should be teaching potions and having Professor Slughorn retire. Severus blushed and said, thanks, I hope it works. They both drank the podio and felt no different. Then Lucius said a spell. Serpensortia. A boa appeared and looked at the boys. He spoke and said, what do you want? Severus gulped and said, I am Severus and I can understand you. The boa said, ah, you found out the potion, well done. Lucius said, thanks, does this mean we can always talk in your language? The boa replied, no, you need to find my book on how to talk snake before you master the language. Severus was so happy he went straight to the library and found the book that the boa was talking about and showed it to Lucius, and they both read the book cover to COV. Then the boa hissed, can you still understand me? Severus and Lucius nodded. The boa was pleased and said, well done, you are now my language speakers, use it wisely. The boa slithered down a drainpipe and into the woods. Severus couldn't believe his eyes and said, we got to show Professor Riddle. Lucius nodded and went straight to Riddle's door and knocked and went inside. Lucius said, good evening, Professor, we got something to show you. Riddle was intrigued and asked, okay, what do you have to show me? Severus went first and spoke, well, sir, during the winter holidays we've been practicing your language. Riddle couldn't believe his ears when Severus spoke to him like a snake. He was so shocked he called Dumbledore and Pablo. They both arrived quickly. Dumbledore was first to ask, what's Lucius and Severus doing here? Riddle replied, Headmaster, sir, these boys have done something amazing. Pablo asked, well, show what you have done. Lucius and Severus gulped and said, during winter we've been brewing potions and taking to a boa, and the boa taught us how to keep this talent after the potion wears off. Dumbledore was confused. Pablo jumped when he heard both boys talking like a snake and understanding them. Dumbledore asked, what did they say? Pablo said, sorry, Headmaster, I forgot you don't speak snake language. These boys have managed a tricky potion. Now they speak like Salazar, even though these boys aren't related to him. Dumbledore was shocked and said, oh my god, boys, please say you've made enough potion for a demonstration to your classmates. Severus sigh. Yeah, I could even teach Professor Slughorn on how to make the potion. Pablo said. Okay Severus, you might have a good career ahead of you. Dumbledore said. Imagine the possibilities of students earning one of the founder's ancient languages. Lucius said. Cool, if only that was a teaching career. Dumbledore said. Yeah Lucius, who knows, maybe you'll be first professor to teach that class. Lucy smiled and asked, can I put together a secret club where students learn snake language? Dumbledore approved. Good idea, anyone can join, even Gryffindor, Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw. Severus and Lucius agreed. When all students returned, Dumbledore made an announcement. Everyone, there's going to be a secret club where you can learn about Salazar ancient language. Severus and Lucius has made it possible to teach and learn Salazar ancient tongue. Anyone can learn, doesn't matter what house you were in. The first meeting will be during the next winter holidays. All students were interested. Narcissi aid. Wow Lucius, you learn the snake tongue. I want to learn. I will ask my parents if they allow me next year to stay behind. Lucius smiled. I would love to teach you. All students went to bed. Pablo's aid to Lucius and Severus. During next winter I will show you a secret room where you can practice and have meetings. Lucius and Severus were intrigued and said, okay, deal. After that everyone went to class as normal. The school year went quick and soon all students went on the train to go home. It was exciting for the third-year students. They found out they going to learn about something called a boggart and facing their fears. James was curious to discover his fear, and so was Lily. Severus knew perfectly well what his fear was. He was trying to overcome it, but nothing seemed to help. Lucy was curious to find out if he feared what his parents suffered. Peter was mainly scared that his fear would be something related to when he was in first year going to trial. Sirius knew his fear was turning into something that scared him, and Remus was also sure that his fear was something that happened to his ancestors in the past. Everyone arrived at Hogwarts and had dinner and went to bed. Varys was up and couldn't get to sleep, so he decided to sneak out and go for a walk. He made sure no one was around and walked very quietly down the corridor. He saw a light halfway down, so decided to investigate. He heard noises coming from a room. Inside the room, Pablo was talking to Tom. Pablo said, Bro, I am 18 now and I am scared because I only have 3 years before my secret comes out. Tom was shocked and asked, Wow, when are you telling the student the truth about your secret and soulmate? Pablo said, You know I can't tell him. If he found out too soon it'd be catastrophic and he would freak out. Severus heard the conversation and didn't understand one bit, so he decided that in the morning he would go to the library after class. Then he went quietly back to bed. In the morning, Professor Riddle said, In this wardrobe there is a boggart. It transforms into something you are scared of, and the only way to get the boggart away is to say ridiculous. Professor Riddle went over to Snape and asked, What frightens you most in the world? Severus gulped and said, Professor Harrington. Professor Riddle asked, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that, say it again. Severus repeated, Professor Harrington, sir. All the students started to laugh. Professor Riddle laughed as well and said, Professor Harrington, yes, he frightens all of us. Severus, you live with your parents, right? Severus said, Yeah, I don't want that thing to turn into my dad. He scares me more. Professor Riddle said, Severus, picture Professor Harrington in your dad's clothing. Severus went forward. The boggart turned into Professor Harrington and Severus said, Ridiculous. And instantly Professor Harrington's clothing turned into Severus' dad's clothes and everyone laughed. Professor Riddle said, Good, excellent. Okay, line up and everyone one by one turn your fear into something funny. Remus was the first to go. His fear was a full moon, so he turned it into a popped balloon. Peter's fear was a mouse trap, and he turned it into the biggest cheese in the world. Sirius' fear wasn't a black dog like he thought, but a prison cell, so he turned it into a beautiful bedroom. Lily was next. Her fear was her family thinking her a freak, so she turned them all into wizards. Lucius' fear was getting a boring job, so he turned it into his dream job. Narcissa's fear was her family disowning her because she wouldn't marry into a wealthy family, so she changed it into a happy family with a wonderful son just like the one she wanted in the future. James was last to face the boggart. He walked forward, and the wardrobe opened and the boggart was himself, dead. Professor Riddle noticed it changing into a Dementor and said, "Expecto Patronum." After the Dementor retreated he said, "Class dismissed." All students left quickly. Professor Riddle walked over and asked James, "What happened when you went near your boggart?" James said, "Well, I was thinking if I died before seeing my children grow up them not having a mother or father. But then my parents told me about Dementors and instead I thought of them." Professor Riddle said, "I am very impressed. That suggests that what you fear most of all is fear itself. This is very wise." James said, "Cool, so I fear the most powerful fear and one that will happen in the future." Professor Riddle said, "Correct. After the holidays I will show the whole class how to get rid of Dementors, but no student will be able to do the spell until they are 15. James was happy, so he left the classroom. Then Pablo walked inside and said, "Hey Tom, how was the class?" Tom said, "Very interesting. Severus, fear was you. And the student who had an unique fear was James Potter." Pablo was interested to hear what his dad's fear was, so he asked, "What is James' fear?" Tom said, "Him dying before seeing his child grow was his original, but then it turned into a Dementor." Pablo said, "His fear is fear itself." "Wow, that's unbelievable. That's my fear too." Tom said, "You don't say. I wonder why James isn't your soulmate." Pablo laughed. "Long story, and you wouldn't believe me if I told you." Third-year classes went by quickly and then it was the winter holidays. Most students went home for the holidays. The ones that stayed wanted to learn about the ancient language called Parseltouch. It was mostly Slytherins who stayed, and so Pablo took the Saint Udents who wanted to learn to the Room of Requirement. Once there he said, "This is a room where you can practice magic to your heart's content." The students were impressed by the room and couldn't wait to get started. Pablo showed all his students the room before they went on holiday. James already knew about the room because he and his friends would practice magic that the school didn't teach in there. James was well on his way to making a cool, special map that shows where students and staff are at all times. He was so close to perfecting it, but needed to be a little more powerful. He asked his parents, "When will my magic increase?" They said, "You'll be able to do it next year." He was bored during the winter holidays, so he used his invisibility cloak to spy on the ancient language meetings. Lucius said, "Welcome everyone. You are here to learn and understand Parseltouch." Narcissa went first and asked, "How do you learn?" Severus said, "Excellent question. You learn by taking a potion and reading a book." So all of the students took the potion and read the book, and one by one each student learned Parseltouch. All of the students talked to each other for a while and then decided to leave. When they left, James took off the invisibility cloak and thought, "Really, that's all it takes? A potion and a book." Lucius saw James looking at the potion and the book and said, "I felt a Gryffindor watching our meetings." James was surprised and said, "Sorry, I was curious." Lucius said, "It's okay. Anyone can learn the language. I have no grudge against you." James said, "Wow, thanks. Okay, I do want to learn. So teach me." Lucius said, "Okay, deal." Lucius taught James all about the potion and the book and the language until finally James could speak Parseltouch. At that moment Severus wandered back inside to see a Gryffindor, none other than James Potter, learning the language. He clapped sarcastically and said, "Wow, how the tables have turned. The great James Potter learning a Slytherin language." James said, "So what? I don't care. I am going to be the first Potter to learn the Slytherin language and hopefully not marry a full-blood. I don't care about my family legacy." Severus was shocked and said, "Wow, the day I see a Potter in Slytherin will be the best day of my life." Then James left the room and went back to the common room. Pablo wandered inside and asked, "Was that James Potter leaving the room?" Lucius said, "Yeah, and he was learning Parseltouch." Pablo was shocked. "Wow, I didn't think a Gryffindor would want to learn Parseltouch." The holidays went by fast and all students returned from home. James said, "Hey friends, enjoy your holiday." Sirius said, "Yeah, it wasn't too bad. What did you get up to?" James's expression turned guilty when he said, "Nothing much, just learned this language." Sirius, Remus and Peter were shocked and Lily said, "Wow James, you were brave." James said, "Thanks, I was super curious." Peter replied, "You can Our curiosity killed the cat, as the saying goes. James laughed and headed to the defense class. Inside, all the students stood gathered together while Professor Riddle showed the class a Dementor. He said, "This Dementor is only a boggart, but the only way to get rid of this boggart is to use a different spell. It is called a Patronus charm. To do this charm you have to say, Expecto Patronum. And, instantly a cobra slithered out of his wand. He said, normally that won't happen on your first try, but because I am an adult wizard the charm works instantly. I highly doubt any of you students will manage it today at your age because you're only supposed to be able to fully manage it at 17. If anyone manages it today then you are one powerful wizard." One by one all students tried. It went in order. The Slytherins went first but none managed it. Severus came close but ultimately nothing happened. Then the Gryffindors had a turn. Sirius, Peter, Remus and Lily had a turn and nothing happened. Then James had a turn. He asked, "May I have 2 goes? I want to try something." Riddle was surprised but said, "Why not since you were last?" James went forward and said, "Expecto Patronum." Nothing happened. Then he took a deep breath and thought of the time during the winter when he was learning the new language and then said, "Expecto Patronum." Everyone surprised when a stag appeared next to James. Riddle was so shocked and rushed towards him with a chocolate bar. He gave it to him and said, "This helps. I wasn't expecting you to even produce a Patronus, let alone a fully fledged animal." Well done. 20 points to Gryffindor for one student managing the charm. Then the class disappeared and Tom wandered over to James and said, "I can't believe you managed that." James said, "Yeah, me neither. I had 2 memories, one of my friends and one of what happened during the winter time." Pablo appeared and said, "Really, Tom?" Speaking to James again, "I am starting to think he's your favorite student." Tom laughed and so did James, and James said, "Well, I might be. Because I just learned a fully fledged Patronus charm at my age." Pablo gulped and said, "Wow, that's really rare. Well done." James left the classroom and Tom said, "Yeah, it was a beautiful stag." Pablo said, "Wow, maybe I underestimated how good James is." Then nothing much or interesting happened and so every student went on the train and went back home for another year. It was an average summer holiday. Nothing much interesting happened apart from Remus getting a scratch from a wild dog. He thought nothing of it, and when he told his parents they weren't too concerned either. When all the students in Hogwarts sat down and the new first years found out what house they would be in, Dumbledore made an announcement. He said, "Everyone from 4th to 6th year will not doing their normal classes. They will be doing a project. You can be by yourself or with others and you may have help from staff members. One rule is that you can't discuss it outside of your group. It has to be a surprise. At the beginning of winter you must show what you learned and what you've been practicing." James couldn't believe his ears. He looked at his friends and asked, "Do you think we should show the project of the map we've been making?" Sirius said, "Yeah, definitely, the staff members will be so impressed." James said, "Great, I've even improved the map. It can show who can speak Parseltongue and who cannot." Remus said, "Really? That would be so handy." Pablo was enjoying not being able to teach for a year, so he asked Dumbledore, "Hey, Headmaster, since the students are occupied, do you mind if I do some errands that I meant to do ages ago?" Albus said, "Certainty, go ahead." Pablo got off his seat and headed to the 3 broomsticks and knocked on the door where Albus' brother lived. He said, "Good morning, Aberforth. You don't know me but I know so much about you. May I come inside?" Aberforth said, "I know you. My brother has talked about you a lot during the holidays before the students returned." Pablo gulped. "Great, okay, this might sound weird but I know you from the future when I am older and don't look like this." Aberforth said, "I don't believe you, prove it." Pablo walked inside and sat on the couch and presented him with a potion vial. Pablo said, "This potion was meant for you, when the new future is on set and if something drastic has happened before I go home." Aberforth looked at the vial and examined it and said, I know exactly what this potion is. Surprisingly I just this second came up with the idea myself. You have arrived surprisingly on time." Pablo was stunned and was super excited to see the results. Aberforth unscrewed the cork and drank the vial and suddenly Auras came flooding back everything that happened in his past and this new past and the old future. He looked at Pablo and said, "Oh my God Harry, wow, you look great." Pablo was overjoyed and said, "Oh thank God. I thought I would do this journey alone." Aberforth asked, "Why have you come to me? Your parents are only 14, it's not the big event yet." Pablo took a deep breath and said, "Well, I found my soulmate. I am currently 19 and when I turn 21 I am going to have my first child." Aberforth gasped and desperately asked, "How did this happen? I just gave you the soulmate time traveling spell and nothing else." Pablo went guilty and said, "Gilbert happened and cursed me in Latin and said to me masculum gravida. Soulmate." Aberforth said, "Oh bother, that's unfortunate. You Harry have the worst luck possible." Pablo said, "Yeah, tell me about it. I can't leave the school while pregnant because my soulmate is in school." Aberforth asked, "How did Voldemort go?" Pablo said, "Well, he's the deference teacher and the irony is that his favorite student is my dad." Aberforth laughed, "Wow, that is bloody hysterical." Pablo asked, "Did you know that Severus was my soulmate?" Aberforth replied, "Yeah, I had a weird feeling that it was going to be Severus. I wanted to be wrong, but then looking at your past it kind of makes sense." Pablo had a question that was bothering him since he got here and asked, "When my child is born and I am born, my child is going to be 5 years older than me and my soulmate will be 20 years older than me. When will people notice that I look a lot like Severus's child?" Aberforth said, "Good question. Well, unfortunately when your body disappeared and you will have to wait until Harry is 21 before you know your destiny, and unfortunately Severus will be 31 not 41 because he will be cursed to stay 21 until Harry turns 11. Pablo replied, "You mean that he'll have the same curse as me because we had child and I disappear?" Aberforth said, "Yes, correct, good luck." Pablo went back to the castle. In the castle all students were getting into teams. Lily chose Severus, because they haven't spoken much recently. She asked, "What do you think our project should be?" Severus said, "I know we are only 14, but how about we perfect the Patronus charm?" Lily loved that idea. Narcissa teamed up with Lucius and said, "I have an idea, how about we find out how to use Parseltongue in everyday spells and see if they are stronger in a different language?" Lucius loved that. He replied, "Brilliant, what a fantastic idea, I love it." During the winter holidays all students stayed in their teams. James and his friends finally learned how to make a secret map, and it has magical abilities to detect if anyone knows Parseltongue. On the map, if there was a snake next to their name you would know they can speak Parseltongue. For some odd reason Professor Harrington didn't appear anywhere on the map. James knocked on Harrington's door and said, "Professor, I have a problem." Pablo opened the door and said, "James, come inside." James walked inside and sat on a nearby couch and said, "Professor, my friends and I have made a map to tell where everyone is in the castle, but when it comes to show your whereabouts, you don't show up." Pablo was annoyed at himself and thought, of course, James and his friends will make the Marauders map and he wouldn't show because technically he won't be on the map because I don't exist yet. He finally said, "You'll have to keep this to yourself, okay James, you promise?" James was curious and nodded and replied, "Sure, no problem." Pablo sighed and said, "Why I don't appear on the map is because I technically don't exist yet." James couldn't believe his ears and asked, "Are you from the future?" Pablo replied, "Yes, I came back to change an event, then I'll return to my time." James was shocked and said, "Okay, I will keep your secret. I will just tell my friends it is just a prototype and we are working out the kinks." Pablo said, "Yeah, that's believable. Okay, good luck with your project." James left the office and went to his friends and said exactly what he would say to his friends. Severus was working with Lily. Lily barged into the classroom they had been practicing in and said, "I know my Patronus charm and I am super excited." Severus said, "That's great news, let me see." Lily showed off her Patronus. It was a doe. Severus couldn't believe his eyes and said, "Wow, your Patronus is a doe, that means you and James are supposed to be together." Lily said, "Yeah, I guess so. I thought I would be with you." Severus smiled and replied, "Sorry Lily, I like you a sister, a great friend." Lily said, "Cool, I didn't realize that you didn't feel that way." Severus said, "Yeah, I kinda knew for a while. Now I need to find who understands me." I also learned the Patronus charm and proved we are going to be best friends. Severus said the charm and a doe appeared and pranced very elegantly. Eily laughed and said, "Wow, I think your doe is exactly what you were scared to admit you like male wizards." Severus blushed red and said, "Well, prove we are going to friends and my partner has a stag for a Patronus." Lily said, "That's weird, two people here have the same Patronus." "How is that possible?" Severus said, "I don't know, it's weird." Down in the dungeons, Lucius and Narcissa were perfecting air project. They couldn't find anything different from normal spells and Parseltown spells. Lucius suggested, "How about the simple spell Lumos?" Narcissa said, "Why not? Good idea." Lucius tried the spell and to his surprise the light turned green. Narcissa was shocked and said, "That's so cool. Do you think if it was another student from a different house, the color would be different?" Lucius said, "What a great suggestion. I know of a Ravenclaw and a Hufflepuff that want to learn Parseltown, but a Gryffindor would be a bit difficult." Narcissa asked, "Isn't James a Parseltown?" Lucius replied, "Yeah, but he's in a different team." Narcissa asked, "How about on the day we get volunteers to show off our project?" Lucius said, "Perfect, great idea." Everyone practiced and practiced, then it was ready for presentation. James's team went first. James said, "We made a map of the school and everyone who goes here. It shows where everyone is at all times, and on the map if there's a snake next to their name it means they can speak Parseltown." Dumbledore was super impressed and so was Tom and Pablo. Minerva said, "Great work, boys." Then it was Lily and Severus's turn. They began together. Severus said, "We have been practicing our Patronus charm and we finally managed to get a fully corporal charm." Lily went first and showed the doe. It was beautiful with a lily on its head. James was shocked to see a doe and was extremely excited. Severus went next. His was also a doe, but his doe was more elegant and pranced proudly. Sirius laughed and whispered to James, "I didn't realize Severus was gay." James whispered back, "Neither did I." "Well, this is going to be interesting." Tom asked, "How do you both have does?" Severus said, "It's because of our friendship and our stags are out there. We just need to find them." Dumbledore likes their answer and said, "Very interesting, well done." Lucius and Narcissa went next. Lucius explained and said, "Since we both speak Parseltown, we decide to test the spells we know, and if they're different, if you speak with a snake voice, our results weren't great, we didn't find a spell until the last moment. We found out Lumos works really different. Let my good friend Narcissa demonstrate." Narcissa said the spell and a bright green light appeared. Pablo was shocked. He said, "That's not a normal Lumos." Lucius said, "Correct, I need 3 other students, one from each house." A Ravenclaw went first and the light turned blue, then a Hufflepuff went next and the light turned yellow, and finally James went next. He said, "It won't work, but okay, I will try." Then James cast the spell and light turned red and he was shocked. He nearly dropped the wand. Tom was surprised he had a shot, and to his surprise it turned green. He said, "Well done, you pair. I wouldn't have noticed that if you didn't demonstrate. Well done." Dumbledore made a speech. He said, "Well done everyone, great presentations. I will see you all after the holidays." Everyone went to their rooms. James stopped Severus in the corridor and asked, "I didn't know you were gay." Severus blushed. "Yeah, neither did I, but don't worry, I don't fancy you. I think Lily does." James said, "I kinda used that if your mate turns out to be a Potter, I would be okay with that." Severus laughed. "What's the chances of that happening?" James said, "You never know the luck." Pablo silently listened to he conversation and laughed and thought, "Oh Dad, you just wait and see." Everyone enjoyed their final days and got on the train and went home. During the summer, Remus wasn't feeling great. He was very witchy. He couldn't stay seated, and when the full moon arrived he couldn't sleep at all. He had too much energy. His parents knew something was definitely wrong, so they took him to a medical doctor and she examined him and said, "I am afraid that Remus is turning into a werewolf. That's why he's been acting the way he's been." Remus was shocked. He asked, "So that wild dog who scratched me was actually a werewolf?" The medical doctor said, "Yes, that's correct. You won't be fully turning until winter time this year." Remus's parents were shocked and said to Remus, "I will send a letter to Dumbledore. Tell Ing him about your condition and hopefully he has a solution. Remus said. Okay. During the winter I'll stay in the school and hopefully as a werewolf at home I will run to where Dumbledore will put me. Remus's parents were hopeful when everyone arrived at Hogwarts. Dumbledore had already read the letter and was shocked and said to Pablo, Remus, this year is going to be interesting, he has the werewolf curse. Pablo said, wow, well there's a shack at the other side of the willow tree. Dumbledore said, yeah I noticed that, plus I noticed that's where you go after the holidays, you and Riddle, why do you go there? Pablo shyly smiled and said, well I put a complicated spell on the shack, it turns into a house if you are related to a Riddle or a Harrington. Dumbledore asked, what ingenious spell idea, who came up with that? Pablo said, my elf Dobby, he designed the house and made the house unique. Everyone was settled in for the night but Remus was still nervous and still awake, so he IDED to find Dumbledore and asked if he got his parents' letter. He found the headmaster in his office, he found the password was sugar sherbet and the door opened. He walked upstairs to find Dumbledore at his desk. He asked, good evening headmaster, I was wondering did you get my parents' letter? Dumbledore said, Remus, right on time to answer your question. Yes I got the letter and I have found a solution. There's an abandoned building near the school which would be perfect. Remus was so pleased that he didn't hear his friends follow him. They revealed themselves and James asked, what's wrong with Remus? Dumbledore said, he's got a curse that turns him into a werewolf. Sirius was so excited he asked, awesome, can we help Remus control his condition? Dumbledore said, no, but maybe if you learned how to be an animagus, then at night time the werewolf in Remus won't be vicious because he's got his friends by his side. Remus loved that idea and said to his friends, would you like to do that with me? We could practice together before winter holidays. James was super excited and said, yeah, can't wait to get started. Peter asked Dumbledore, headmaster, what professor could help us become animagus? Dumbledore said, Professor Riddle has already learned how to be an animagus, so has McGonagall, so either of those teachers can help you. The friends left the headmaster's office and went back to bed and were extremely excited to ask a professor for advice. In the morning they asked Professor Riddle and Riddle was shocked that the boys wanted to learn to be animagus at this age, so he asked, Ked, why do you want to learn at the age of 15? Remus said, well you see sir, I am going to turn into a werewolf during the winter holidays. After the first full moon, the next moon, I will transform into a werewolf. Riddle was surprised and said, okay, I'll help you, but first you need to learn the potion to transform so you know what animal your animagus is. Sirius asked, does that mean we need to ask him as well? Riddle replied, yeah it does. Remus thought, great, oh well. The boys went to find Professor Slughorn and they talked about why they wanted to become animagus. Slughorn was concerned and asked Dumbledore to confirm the boys' wish, and he said it was all right at this young age. After classes they boys practiced with Slughorn and Riddle. Then not long later the winter holidays arrived. During the winter James and his friends were learning how to be an animal. James found out he would be a stag just like his Patronus charm, which surprised him. When his friends told him Peter's form was a rat, it didn't surprise him as much as his friends. He said, I asked my family if they have experience with animagus and they said that they were always in the rodent family when any family member found out their animagus. Sirius was a big fluffy black dog, and when he returned to his wizard form his friends were so shocked, and James said, your animagus is scary, it's a big fluffy black dog, it looks like death. Sirius gulped and said, maybe I needed to ask my family members why I turned into a black dog. All three nodded, so Sirius wrote them a letter saying that he's a black dog for animagus and asking if it is normal. His dad replied back quickly and said, yeah, it's perfectly natural. Because our family always go with the things that scare anyone, plus it proves you are meant to be in Slytherin. Sirius was annoyed with his answer and told his friends. Remus said, maybe the scary dog would calm the werewolf in me. Sirius laughed and said, if that's true then that would be awesome, and I can rub it in my dad's face saying my black dog helps my friends. So for the next week they perfected the animagus spell. Lily was curious, so she asked James, what have you been up to? Your friends have been so distant. James said, We were just trying Animagus to help Remus, he's kind of in trouble. Lily was extremely curious. She asked Remus, "What's wrong with you?" Remus smiled and said, "I am turning into a werewolf in a couple days and my friends have been practicing the Animagus spell and potion." Lily was so shocked and said, "Awesome. Is my theory right that James's Animagus is a stag?" Remus gulped and said, "Yeah, how did you know?" Lily said, "Well, it's believed that your Patronus is what your Animagus is." Remus was surprised about the comment and said, "Well, that explains why my Patronus is a wild dog. I found out during the summer time when I was too hyper to sleep." Lily laughed and said, "Well, your boggart is a full moon, that explains a lot." Remus said, "It was like everything around me knew it was going to turn out like this." The boys practiced all week and finally they were able to transform. The second full moon was about to rise and then Remus was outside turning into a werewolf. His body got stronger and his fur was gray and his eyes were bright yellow. He looked at his friends and they had already changed. The black dog said, "Hey buddy, how are you?" Remus said, "This is fantastic. I want to go and play." The animals played the whole night away. They arrived at the abandoned shack and the stag said, "This is the Severus's soulmate." Dumbledore said, "Well, show me lad, what is it?" Pablo showed Dumbledore and again it was a snowy owl. Dumbledore was curious and asked, "Does this owl mean anything to you?" Pablo went guilty and said, "Yeah, a long time I lost her." Dumbledore said, "Well, that's the problem, you were thinking of someone you lost and loved, that's why it's representing an owl." Pablo said, "That's fantastic. I thought my Patronus was going to be a stag to convince Severus that he and I are soulmates." Dumbledore said, "Ah, I see your problem. Just tell him that when Grindelwald cast the spell you thought your soulmate was him and I. In fact, we are soulmates, but you are not his future soulmate." Pablo loved that solution and said, "Thanks, I will tell him that when the problem comes forward." During the rest of the year nothing much more happened. Then the train arrived and everyone went home for the summer. During the summer Remus was enjoying having his friends help him go to the shack and also found a solution to keep his wolf at bay, which was a new potion called Wolfbane Potion. The wizard who made the potion was Damocles Belby. Elsewhere Pablo was freaking out because he turned 21 years old and he wasn't ready. He asked Aberforth and said, "I am not ready, I can't believe this is happening to me." Aberforth said, "I also found when your baby arrival is and it's Halloween. When Harry is born your body will leave this time at Halloween, which is freaky." Pablo said, "Are you positive? Halloween? You know what happened to me last Halloween, my parents died and I was sent to my aunt's house." Aberforth connected the dots and said, "That explains a lot, and talk about irony." Pablo wasn't pleased one bit. He said, "It's just the Potter luck, and to make matters worse my Patronus has changed, it's now my snowy owl." Aberforth said, "Wow, you are having the worst luck possible. Well, good luck, I'll visit on the night you disappeared." Pablo left the house and went back to Hogwarts. A while later everyone arrived at school and Pablo was having his first morning sickness. Dumbledore said, "Professor Harrington isn't well at the moment, so some of his classes won't be available. He'll tell you when he's ready to teach." Severus was very suspicious, so after breakfast he wandered to visit. He found his office and knocked on the door and Pablo answered and said, "Yes, what do you want?" Severus said, "I just wanted to know how you were, Professor, I was worried." Pablo said, "Ah, Snape, yes, I am okay, I just need rest." Severus was okay with that answer and left the door and headed back to his dorm. Lucius asked, "Where were you?" Severus said, "Checking on how Professor Harrington was." Lucifer asked, "How is he?" Severus asked, "He looks awful, he looks like he's going through morning sickness." Lucius said, "Impossible. That would mean he's pregnant, which is impossible unless he was cursed." Severus was shocked by that response and went straight to Headmaster's office. Luckily Albus was just going into his office. Severus asked, "Headmaster sir, is Professor Harrington pregnant?" Dumbledore asked, "How did you find out?" Severus went guilty and said, "Well, me and my friend Lucius were trying to work it out and I saw his face and he looked like he has throwing up recently." Dumbledore said, "You are a smart one. No wonder Professor Slughorn said you'd be the perfect potion teacher when he retires. Severus couldn't believe his ears and said, "Wow. Thank you, sir. My mother said that to me every day." Dumbledore said, "I am very sorry to hear of your loss. Your mother was an outstanding witch." Severus said, "Yeah, thanks, sir. I just want to do her proud." And with that news he went back to bed and slept until morning. When Severus woke he had an idea and rushed to the potion lab and made a morning sickness potion. Luckily his mother taught him how to make one in case of an emergency if a friend was pregnant. He made it perfectly and asked Professor Slughorn for his approval, and Professor Slughorn said, "You made it perfectly. Take it along to your friend." Severus left the potion classroom with the vial and knocked on his door and said, "I've got a morning sickness potion to help you with your problem." Blow allowed him entrance and said, "Thanks, that's going to helpful." Severus asked, "Why don't you go to St. Mungo's? I am sure they have got a medical wizard who has dealt with this sort of thing before." Pablo said, "I would love to, but because of Grindelwald curse I am stuck here." Severus bravely asked, "Why are you stuck here?" Pablo finally came to his senses and asked, "Well, how would you like it being told as an 11-year-old wizard that you have a soulmate and he's 16, 5 years older than you, and on the 11-year-old boy's birthday when he turns 16 years old that you and this older boy are going to have child together?" Severus didn't understand, then finally understood and said, "You mean me and you are soulmates and this is my child?" Pablo said, "Give the man 1,000 points, he's finally caught up." "Yes, Severus Snape, you and me are soulmates." Severus couldn't speak. He rushed out the room to get fresh air. He didn't know what to do. The professor who hated him Ali was hiding the truth that he loves him. He started to cry and cry, then suddenly Professor Riddle saw the boy and said, "I guess my brother told you about his pregnancy and who's the father?" Severus nodded. "How has he managed to keep it a secret all this time?" Riddle said, "Well, he hasn't. Why do you think he's been hard on you, challenged you, let you enjoy life?" Severus said, "You mean he fared all this time so I could have a normal life and even fall in love?" Riddle asked, "You love someone?" Severus said, "No, I have loved Professor Harrington for so long now I thought he didn't like me. That's why I tried to impress him at every challenge." Riddle said, "Wow, you two are perfect, but he's not a true soulmate. He doesn't have a stag for a Patronus." Pablo said, "Thanks, brother, I was going to say that." Severus asked, "So we aren't true soulmates, we are just mad enough to have child together?" Pablo replied, "Yes, and you'll stay 21 until your actual soulmate arrives at Hogwarts." Severus said, "Really? Because I had a child with you I get your family curse?" Pablo said, "Yeah, that's the annoying part, but when you find out, challenge him like I challenged you because you'll understand the torture I put myself through, and you can't say anything to him until he turns 16. Severus said, "I like the odds, I like that a lot. Why do I have a feeling you're leaving soon?" Pablo said, "Must be our soulmate connection. Yes, I am leaving, but not for another 5 years and on Halloween." Then finally everyone had a good conversation and enjoyed the company. Then the winter month started and the winter holidays started. It was almost the winter holidays and Pablo was preparing himself. Severus's help was really helpful. He would make extra nutrition potions and morning sickness potion whenever Pablo was needing them. Then that fateful day arrived. All of a sudden Pablo had the worst pain possible. Before the winter holidays started, Pablo was overwhelmed with happiness. He wished his friends and parents saw this day. Then Aberforth appeared and said, "Pablo, great seeing you. So what did you have?" Pablo said, "I had a son, he's gorgeous." Aberforth looked at this handsome baby boy and said, "Ah, he's gorgeous. He has Severus's eyes and hair, but the face is differently yours." Pablo said, "Yeah, I was shocked how he looked so much like me and Severus, it almost took my breath away." Then a few minutes later Dumbledore arrived with Riddle and said, "Well, let's meet the little one." Pablo said, "Come and meet Severus's and I's son." Riddle was so happy he felt wonderful and said, "Ah, he's perfect. Bro, I won't be teaching any longer. I want to find a new job, so after Severus graduates I will be looking for someone to take my place." Pablo was surprised about this news. He said, "I would happily teach for only 5 years. Albus said, "That's fine with me. Why only 5 years?" Pablo said, Well, I got another engagement to go to. Albus asked Riddle, can I have a portrait? Night of you so I can tell future generations of the wonderful Professor Riddle. Riddle couldn't believe his ears and said, yes please, could you also do one of Pablo as well? Albus said, why not, great idea. Pablo was overwhelmed and said, I didn't realize I made such a difference. Severus said, that means that when I get lonely I can talk to you. Pablo was so touched and said, now I wish I wasn't going but I need to. Aberforth said, you can't change destiny. Albus looked at his brother and asked, I didn't realize you and Pablo knew each other. Aberforth said, yeah, we go way back. I met Pablo when he was about to adopt Tom as his brother. Pablo was surprised that Albus actually bought what Aberforth said and didn't ask any more questions, and it was lovely to see them getting along so well. Pablo was extremely happy. A few hours later a whole lot of students came to the hospital wing to see the new baby. James said, wow Pablo, he looks like you and Severus. Pablo said, I should hope so. James looked at Severus and asked, when did you knock up the professor? Pablo laughed and thought to himself, oh Dad, if only you knew that you were a grandfather right now. Severus blushed and said, I didn't. Professor Harrington was in the Grindelwald war and Grindelwald cursed him to become pregnant with his soulmate, which would be me, but we aren't Patronus soulmates. James said, wow, that's incredible, congrats. All the students were shocked of the story and how it happened. It was end of the year and everyone went on the train and went home. Severus asked, do you want to live at Spinner's End with me? Pablo was shocked by the offer and said, yeah definitely, I loved that idea. Pablo and Severus called their son Daniel. They got used to being parents, it came second nature to them. Daniel's personality was slowly approaching. Severus was studying how to be the best potion teacher. He learned a lot of potions that some teacher didn't know about. During the summer James and Lily started dating. Their parents were okay with this. James's dad was shocked about their Patronus and said, you pair are so unique, I loved it. Lily blushed and so did James. He said, thanks, Dad. Narcissa and Lucius started dating. They had so many things in common. Even Lucius's dad approved and said, you pair are perfect, son. You really want to go into teaching languages? Lucius said, yeah, that makes me happy in life. Lucius' dad and mother was very pleased and helped him in his study and was surprised how much knowledge he knew about other languages. When school started, Severus and Pablo took Daniel to school. They had a private nursery where a house elf would help them out. Severus asked, which elf would help out? Pablo called, Dobby. And the elf appeared right away. Pablo sighed. This is my son with Severus. We would like you to look after him while I teach and Severus learns his final year. Dobby said, I would love to, master, it would be my pleasure. Severus said, what a lovely elf. Pablo said, thanks, I am going to give him to either the school or a new family. Severus said, what a lovely thought, maybe the Malfoys or James and Lily. Pablo replied, maybe, I don't know yet. Severus left and went to class. Pablo stayed behind and said, Dobby, do you recognize if two wizards look alike? Dobby replied, well sir, as an elf we do have a perfect memory. If you mean if another person in the future comes along and looks like you but not your name, then I won't hesitate and say you look like my old master. Pablo was worried and said, what are the chances of that happening? Dobby said, very rarely. If it does, I promise not do something silly. Pablo said, thank you, please look after Daniel, he means the world to me. Pablo began teaching the first year about beginner's magic. All the students enjoyed learning everything they could. They even got disapparition lessons outside of Hogwarts. They learned it quite quickly. They even learned about the unforgivable curses which no wizard should go through. They learned basic aura training as well as teaching. Severus got to know Professor Slughorn better and better. He asked, should I be as stern as Pablo was on my first day? Slughorn said, yeah definitely, maybe you can scare a student to make you as a boggart. During the winter all students studied for their OWLS test. Not surprising, Severus got outstanding in defense and potions and herbiology. Pablo was so pleased with the results he could burst with happiness. Dumbledore was more proud and said, yes defiantly, you'll take over Slughorn's place when you turn 21. Severus was so happy he said, can my favorite house elf Winky help babysitting while I teach? Albus said, of course she can. I thought Pablo will be helping you. Severus replied, well, when I turn 21 Pablo has to go somewhere else. He won't tell me. I tried to convince him not to go, but he has to. Pablo came into the room and said, did someone say my name? Albus sighed, that would be me. Why do you have to leave in 5 years' time? Pablo said, well, truth is that I was on a mission, and 5 years' time I will have completed the mission. Don't worry, in the future I'll explain everything. Albus and Severus agreed to leave it at that, but were still curious. Albus was determined to find the bottom of the mystery. It was end of the year. Everyone went on the train to go home. When Severus was 18, he was studying a lot and learned a better version of the draft of Living Death. He showed it to Professor Slughorn, and he was fascinated about how Severus made the potion. He asked, show me how you made this potion. Severus showed how he made the potion step by step, and Professor Slughorn made notes and said, we should present this to an Auror and maybe we could get our names in a potion book. Severus was shocked and said, that's a fantastic idea. Professor Slughorn and Severus practiced a lot on the potion. Lily and James became Auror trainees and were learning the ropes. Aleister Moody was their supervisor, and if something happened they would come to him to see if they can solve the problem or it was too advanced to solve. Lucius and Narcissa went to study more and more. Lucius did his time studying about every languages a wizard or witch needed to learn. Remus and Sirius were practicing their wandless magic skills and advanced skills they don't teach in Hogwarts. They got really good. Sirius asked, hey Lupin, do you think you want to be the new defense teacher? Remus laughed and said, the Ministry of Magic wouldn't hire a werewolf as a professor. Sirius said, what happen if I became your assistant and teach the class when you too ill to teach, and I can change into my animagus at night time to calm you down? Remus loved that idea and hugged him. Peter decided that an errand boy at Ministry would be a good idea, and so he went straight there and decided to get his animagus license. And when the headminster found out that he was a rat, he said, your animagus is outstanding. That means you can sneak around the office without being seen and send things to the wizard. Peter said, wow, thanks sir. Yeah, I would love to do that job. Throughout the years everything happened the same. James and Lily became main Auror. Their boss Aleister said, you have done well. I am happy to say you have passed. James and Lily were so happy that they went to a fancy restaurant to celebrate. Then at the restaurant James said, Lily, I love you. Will you marry me? Lily was speechless and said, yes, 1,000 times yes. Lucius and Narcissa were getting so good that they showed the Ministry their magic. They were so impressed they asked if Narcissa would teach Auror the language and Lucius to be hired as a professor at Hogwarts. They were both speechless. They said yes at the same time. They went to celebrate and Lucius proposed to Narcissa. She said, yes, definitely. Remus and Sirius were getting really good and went to headminster and said, I want to be the new defenses teacher and I want Sirius to help me. The minster said, well, I think not. I am sorry. They were both not happy. They left and went home. Peter was a perfect errand wizard. He loved his job. He often saw James and Lily being Aurors. He was so proud. Severus did get his name in a potion chapter. It wasn't the name of the author but the potion. It was called the Living Death Potion by Severus Snape and Professor Slughorn. They were so happy. He showed Pablo and he was over the moon with happiness. The following year was interesting. Lily found out she was pregnant. She was so happy. She said, James the first am pregnant. James was so happy he could burst with happiness. Lily told her parents, then she told Severus. He was super excited and he told Pablo he was also excited. He went to tell Aberforth. He said, Lily is pregnant. Aberforth said, that's wonderful, I have solved the problem. When you return into Harry Potter you will remember being Pablo, but everyone around you won't believe you. So I made the potion you gave me and made it so everyone can take a sip and everyone will remember who you are. Pablo was so happy and said, thanks Aberforth, I suppose I'll see you when I am a different person. Aberforth said, enjoy your journey and your new life as Harry Potter. A few months later Lily gave birth to a healthy baby. They named him Harry Potter. Yoan was overjoyed and James said, Remus, you'll be a great professor. I don't know why the Ministry doesn't think so. Remus said, Because I am werewolf and they think I cannot control myself. James S. Aid. That's shocking, but will you Sirius and Peter be my son's godfather? All three boys were shocked and said, yes, definitely. Severus arrived at the house and said, so what did you have? Lily said, a son, we named him Harry James Potter. Severus was so happy and said, when Harry starts school my son will be in his 6th year, which is really scary to think about. Lily said, wow, that is scary, good luck in teaching. Severus said, thanks. He headed home and said to Pablo, Lily and James had a son, they named him Harry James Potter. Pablo was so happy. Pablo and Severus were really good at teaching their son. They enjoyed spending time together, and suddenly on their son's 6th birthday Pablo leave for a bit, then return far in the future. Albus asked, that means you are a time traveler and Pablo is not your true name. Pablo said, correct, I guess my occlumency powers are weakening if you can work that out. Severus was shocked and asked, does that mean you are my future husband? Pablo replied, yes, I traveled to the past to save my future and you. Aberforth arrived and said, I guess the weaker you are your shield will go down. I am sorry I forgot to mention that. Pablo said, thanks, I wish I had known that sooner. Aberforth felt guilty. Albus looked at his brother and asked, brother, you know exactly who Pablo is? Aberforth said, yes, but I have been sworn to secrecy until the time is right when Pablo returns. I'll tell all about what happened. Later that night Pablo was weak, he faded away and a wizard was on the bed no more. Albus was surprised how Pablo faded away, and looked at Severus and said, when you start aging then we'll know who your soulmate is and maybe the mystery of Pablo. Severus said, yeah, I didn't want to tell him, but his brother Tom he adopted is on his way to become head minister of magic. Albus was shocked. Wow, maybe Tom will make the rule that a werewolf can teach at Hogwarts. Severus said, I would like that. Hopefully when Harry starts his 1st year Remus will be professor. Quote, Severus had his first teaching day. All the students were scared of him and he asked questions just like his good friend Pablo before him. He got really good at his job. Daniel turned 11 and was on the train to Hogwarts. He met a boy named Oliver. They both decided to be rivals, but in a good way. They would both try their best at Hogwarts to be in say parade houses, but try and be the best at everything. Daniel enjoyed the competition. When they arrived, Daniel was first to sit on the chair. The Sorting Hat said, ah, you are Daniel Snape, the boy that wanders around Hogwarts when your dad's teaching. Where to put you? You have talent of getting into trouble, would make me think you are a Gryffindor. Daniel said, I really want Slytherin like my dad Severus. Please. The Sorting Hat said, okay, if that's your choice. The Sorting Hat shouted Slytherin. Severus was so happy and thought, that took longer than I thought it would. I need to ask my son why it took so long. Oliver was sorted into Gryffindor. They went to their rooms and got sorted into their rooms. Severus wandered inside the Slytherin dorm room and asked, what took you so long in sorting today? Daniel said, well, I had an argument with the Hat, he almost put me in Gryffindor. Severus was shocked and said, you were almost a Gryffindor. Maybe Pablo was Gryffindor and didn't tell me. Daniel said, maybe that's why you two had such good rival. Severus laughed and went back to his room. In the Potter house, Harry was 5 years old and teaching his brother about the courses at Hogwarts. Adrian said, Hogwarts sounds so exciting, I hope we both get the same house. Harry asked, can you speak to snakes? Adrian replied, no, I can't. Maybe because only Dad can speak snake. It's 50-50 chances that 2 children will speak snake. Harry was disappointed and said, Dad said he learned it in school, so hopefully it's a subject you can learn. James said to Lily, I still think we Holt have told Dumbledore that we had a second child. Lily said, honey, you worry too much. Daniel's first year was a blast. He enjoyed the puzzle room during the winter break. During his 2nd year he found out he could talk to snakes. He said to his father, look what I can do. Severus was so shocked and said, well done son, you did get mine and Pablo's gift. During Daniel's 3rd year he acted so much on the subject of Patronus, but Professor Quirrell was no help at all. During Daniel's 4th year he learned about different wizard contests to improve the school, and he asked Dumbledore. There should be a rule once learned how to disapparate, only headmaster should have the power. Dumbledore loved that idea. Severus didn't. He was not amused and said to Daniel, "You are a troublemaker. Maybe you should be in Gryffindor and wait until I see your father again. Me and him are going to have a long talk." During Daniel's 5th year he practiced more about potions. He learned a helpful potion for wizards who become addicted to the potion of dreamless sleep. Severus was so proud. Daniel started 6th year and became head boy, and so did Oliver Wood. Tom Riddle became Minster of Magic. A.N.D. made the rule a werewolf can teach at Hogwarts as long they take their potion and have an assistant to help them during the class that she can't teach. When Remus heard the news he went straight to Hogwarts and asked Dumbledore, "May I teach defense with Sirius?" Dumbledore said, "Lucky our defense teacher deiced a new career path and left, and we have been down a good defense teacher for a while. Now, you are hired." Severus was shocked that Pablo had an elf called Dobby. Severus thought since Pablo wasn't needing the elf and his friend, Lucius, had a son, maybe the elf could belong to him. Severus went straight over and said, "Lucius, I have an elf named Dobby here and was wondering, would you like to look after him?" Lucius said, "It would be a pleasure." Dobby said, "I would like a new moss chair, but when Pablo returns I will no longer serve you but him." Lucius agreed and Severus liked that idea. He said, "That would prove the future. Pablo is actually Pablo of the past." James and Harry went to Diagon Alley to get Harry's school supplies. Harry decided on an owl as his pet. He named him Hedwig. It was a birthday treat for himself. He had been saving up money to buy himself a good present. Then they both headed into Ollivander's and Mr. Ollivander said, "Wow, is it time already for Harry to get his wand?" Harry tried different wands and none worked. Ollivander had an idea and said, "Maybe this wand." Harry tried the wand and it lit up like a Christmas tree. Ollivander was shocked and said, "Wow, how curious. I made 2 of these wands and the wizard who owned the other wand said that in the future a wizard would possess the same wand." James asked, "Who was the other owner?" Ollivander said, "A young 16-year-old wizard called Pablo Harrington." James was super shocked and didn't understand at all. Harry asked, "Isn't his brother the of the head Ministry of Magic, Tom Riddle?" Ollivander replied, "What a smart wizard you are. I see a very interesting first year for you." They headed home. And James told his wife of their trip to Ollivander's. Dumbledore went to a Muggle family called the Grangers. He asked at the house, "Is Hermione Granger home?" Mrs. Granger said, "Yes, please come inside." Dumbledore went inside and sat on the sofa. He said, "Hermione is a special child. She is a Muggle born, which means she can come to Hogwarts." Hermione said, "I told you a wizard school called Hogwarts existed." Albus was surprised and said, "Well, Hermione, you and your parents are allowed to wander around to get to know the place." Hermione was shocked and super excited. All 4 left and got on the train to view Hogwarts. Hermione loved the place as soon as she arrived. Once she saw the library she couldn't wait to read as much as possible. Professor McGonagall was very pleased with the young wizard and said, "I hope you manage to get into Gryffindor because I think you will be a bright young wizard and asset to Gryffindor." At the end of the visit Hermione's parents were happy to allow Hermione to come to Hogwarts. James, Lily, Adrian and Harry went to the station together. They met the Weasley family at the station. Lily asked, "Wow, Molly, is it true that Ron is starting his first year?" Molly replied, "Yes, I can't believe Harry's starting his first year as well." Harry and Ron went through the wall and boarded the train. Adrian said, "Cool, can't wait until next year, it's going to my turn." Ginny said, "It's going to my turn as well. Hey, I am Ginny." Adrian said, "Hey Ginny, my name's Adrian Potter, great to meet you." On the train Ron and Harry had one of every sweet on the trolley. A girl interrupted by opening the door saying, "Have you seen a lost frog?" Ron said, "No, I haven't. My name is Ron, by the way." Hermione said, "Pleasure, my name is Hermione Granger." Harry said, "My name Harry Potter, nice to meet you." Hermione said, "Isn't your mum and dad the famous Auror who completed their course the quickest?" Harry nodded, "That's right." Hermione replied, "You better get your robes on, we be arriving soon." Harry got off the train and met Hagrid, who said, "First years, let's go on the boat." So they all got on the boat. Everyone was astonished by the castle. Then they got of F the boat and went up the stairs inside the castle. McGonagall was at the top of the stairs and said, "When you walk into the hallway behind these doors you'll be sorted into your house." Draco said, "Wow, the coolest Aura's son has arrived, Harry Potter." Harry said, "Hey Draco, isn't your dad famous for doing this?" "Hey Draco, pleasure to meet you." Draco was astonished and said, "Wow Potter, you are full of surprises." Ron said, "Harry, you never told me you spoke Parseltongue." Harry looked guilty and said, "Yeah, because my dad learned it as a student and he kinda passed it down to his kid as well." Ron said, "That's way cool. It would probably freak my parents out if I learned Parseltongue." Hermione said, "Well, I find it interesting. I might try it in my second year." Draco was amused and said, "The day I see a Muggle born learn a Slytherin language I wouldn't believe it." They all headed into the main hall and waited to be called for. Hannah Abbott was first to go. She got Hufflepuff. Hermione Granger got Gryffindor. Draco Malfoy got Slytherin. Ron Weasley got Gryffindor. Luna Lovegood got Ravenclaw. Neville Longbottom got Gryffindor. Then it was Harry's turn. He sat on the chair and the hat began to talk. It said, "Ah, Harry Potter, I remember when your dad started Hogwarts. You have exact same mind as him and another student, Daniel Snape. I wanted him to be Gryffindor but he chose Slytherin. What would you choose?" Harry was shocked. He had a choice and so he thought for a long time and said, "I would like Gryffindor even though I made friends with Draco." The hat said, "Wise choice. That's what happened to Daniel. He made friends with Oliver and then they decided to compete against each other." The hat shouted, "Gryffindor." Harry went across to his seat and sat down. Then he looked at all the staff members and saw his godfather and friend sitting at the table. Alongside him was another professor. He looked awfully young. He asked Oliver, "Who's that sitting next to Professor Lupin?" Oliver replied, "Oh, that's Professor Snape. He teaches potions." Harry asked, "Why does he look so young?" Oliver said, "Oh, he has a curse on him. If he didn't he would be 31. Harry was amused by his appearance and remembered his father telling stories of their childhood with Remus, Sirius and Peter growing up with Lucius and Narcissa and Severus. Then he got a shiver and suddenly so did Professor Snape. He was shocked and not amused. Dumbledore saw the shiver and said, "Severus, come to my office after dinner please." Severus was intrigued as to why Dumbledore wanted to talk to him. He went to see what he wanted. He said the password outside the headmaster's office, "Sugar Snaps." The gargoyle allowed him entrance and Snape asked, "Headmaster, why am here?" Albus said, "I remember when Pablo got the shiver you just had in the main hall and Tom doing the spell to confirm something. Albus did the spell and it was just as Albus thought. He said, 'Severus, you are finally aging. You'll turn 32 next year.'" Severus was completely shocked and said, "What, seriously? Harry Potter is my future husband?" Albus laughed and replied, "Wow, I didn't see that coming. Does that mean Pablo was Harry Potter all this time?" Severus said, "Oh God, I hope not, because that's really funny. James has a grandson and he doesn't even know about it." Albus said, "Well, you won both bets. You said a Potter would never marry a Slytherin and a child of Potter wouldn't be in Slytherin." Then Snape laughed and said, "Damn, James is never going to believe me." After Harry and his friends got settled into their dorms, Ron said, "Oh great. Potions first thing. I am useless at potions." Harry said, "Cool. Why don't we practice our answers?" "Because my dad said, a potions teacher will always pick on one student and ask them 3 questions. And it's the same 3 questions. They haven't changed one bit. Luckily, Dad told me the answers." Ron asked, "How do you know you are going to be the one Professor Snape picks on?" Harry answered, "Simple. I am going to be writing in class and not paying attention." Everyone went to sleep and in the morning everyone had breakfast then headed to class. Both Gryffindors and Slytherins settled down in their seats and Professor Snape marched in and said, "There will be no foolish wand waving or silly incantations in this class. As such, I don't expect many of you to appreciate the subtle science and exact art that is potion making. However, for those select few who possess the predisposition, I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death." Then Severus wandered over and saw Harry writing in his book and said, "Then again, Maybe some of you have come to Hogwarts in possession of abilities so formidable that you feel confident enough to not pay attention. Severus said, Mr. Potter, our famous wizard. I have a selection of questions my teacher asked my class on my first day. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar? Lastly, what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? Harry thought for a moment and said, well sir, my dad told me about that class and he remembers your answers to this day. He said that you said asphodel and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the draught of the living death. A bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat and it will save you from most poisons. As for monkshood and wolfbane, they are the same plant, which also goes by the name of aconite. Snape grumbled and said, well done. 30 points to Gryffindor and, mark my word, DS, those are the last points I'll ever give a Gryffindor. I hope everyone is writing Mr. Potter's answers down on paper. Everyone scribbled the answers down and headed off to lunch. Harry stayed behind and asked, Sir, why did you ask those questions exactly? Professor Snape said, well, when I was younger my mother asked those exact same questions to me. Harry was intrigued and said, well, according to Victorian flower language, asphodel is a type of lily meaning, my regrets follow you to the grave, and wormwood means absence, and also typically symbolizes bitter sorrow. If you combi Ned the questions a whole you are saying, I bitterly regret Lily's death. Snape said, well done, yeah, I never understood why I would regret your mother's death because she's still alive. Harry had a thought and replied, maybe in another lifetime my mother did die and at the time you thought you're the one who caused it. Snape said, wow, I never thought of that before. Have you seen the painting of the past professors? Harry replied, no, I haven't. Could you please show me on our way to lunch? Snape said, okay, let's go. They both walked together. Snape showed Harry the painting of Tom Riddle first. He said, Tom was a marvelous defense teacher. Harry nodded, yeah, I heard he's the head of the Ministry of Magic now. Snape said, that's correct. The painting next to him is his brother, Pablo J. Harrington. He was a great teacher. Harry looked at Pablo's painting, then looked at Snape and saw a small smile and asked, is it true you and him had a child together? Snape replied, yeah, that's true. My son Daniel is a marvelous student. Harry was curious and asked, how did it happen? Snape said, well, Pablo fought in the Great Grindelwald War and he got hit by an old lat. In spell, which means when a certain first-year student turns 16 he becomes your soulmate to help raise a child. Harry was shocked and surprised by the story and asked, wow, that's incredible, why did the student have to be 16? Snape said, it's how soulmate curses work. You can't tell an 11-year-old that you're someone's soulmate and we're destined to be together. How would you lick it if I said to you that you're my soulmate and we're destined to get married and be together? Harry was taken back by that question and replied, well, I don't know, maybe you can't choose destiny or your partner. Who knows what the future will bring? Snape said, very wise answers, I like it. They both went off to lunch. Dumbledore was watching in the background and thought, those two are so perfect together. I cannot wait until Harry turns 16 and gets told the truth that he and Snape are soulmates. After lunch it was Transfigurations and Harry and Ron were late. Ron said, can you imagine the look on McGonagall's face if we just arrived now? Then the cat on the desk turned into McGonagall and said, what took you so long? Ron said, that was bloody brilliant. Harry replied, we got lost. She replied, well, get a map. I take it you don't need one to find your seats. After class, dinner arrived. Everyone had dinner and went to bed. Then the winter holidays started. During the winter break Dumbledore was hard at work. He sorted out the hidden room and made a separate room with a special mirror. He looked into the mirror and it still showed him and Grindelwald being friends at Hogwarts. He smiled. Snape wandered inside and saw Dumbledore looking at the mirror. He walked towards Dumbledore and asked, Headmaster, what are you looking at? Dumbledore said, Severus, this is a special mirror. It shows past, present and future. It only shows what could be. Severus looked into the mirror. It showed him his childhood with his mum. It also showed him finding out Pablo being pregnant, and it showed him and Harry having a child together. He was shocked about the future. He asked, how that possible? It showed me and Harry having a child together. Dumbledore was amused and replied, I wonder what Harry going to see. Severus replied, I dread to think. I really wonder. During the break Harry was studying up about what Professor Snape had said about soulmates. He asked Hermione, are soulmates rare? Hermione replied, it has been known to be very rare but your mum and dad were Patronus soulmates, which is rarest than most. Harry also asked, but two male wizards who have a child and aren't Patronus soulmates, is that rare? Hermione said, extremely rare. That's kinda the unluckiest thing to happen. Harry said, damn, this teacher Pablo had the worst luck possible. Hermione said, oh, I see, that's what's with the questions. I've got one for you too. Why do you and Professor Snape get along so well? Harry said, no clue. That's what I want to know too. Harry, Hermione and a bunch of other Gryffindors found a room with hidden stairs and did a puzzle. When it came to a potions task, Harry got it correct. They had a mini chess challenge and Ron did well on that challenge. Hermione's challenge was simple. It was how to open doors, and luckily she had just finished reading her first-year charm book and said, Allura Mora. That was the final challenge and everyone succeeded. Then the rest of the first years tried the challenge too. Draco's challenge was to catch an old key on a broom. He made it look simple. Then it was end of term. Everyone had dinner and went to bed, and in the morning they headed on the train home. During the summer holidays, Adrian received his letter to go to Hogwarts. He was so excited that he wrote to Ginny and said, Dear Ginny, I got my letter. Do you think we'll both be in Gryffindor together? From Adrian Potter. Ginny received the letter and was also hopeful that they'd be in the same house together. Minerva and Albus were shocked, and Minerva said, wow. James and Lily had a second son and they didn't even tell us. Albus said, oh bother. 2 Potters in Hogwarts the same time, this is going to be interesting. Severus demanded, how did this happen? Who is Adrian Potter? Albus said, Lily's second child. Severus was shocked and surprised. The 1st of September arrived and everyone went on the train. Harry and Ron were talking about the holidays. Then Harry said, did you know that in 3rd year we're supposed to learn the Patronus charm? Ron said, yeah, it's to get rid of Dementors. Harry turned shy and said, well, I kinda learned it before our 3rd year. I can show you. Ron said, yeah, please, go ahead. Harry said, Expecto Patronum. Then a bright light appeared and out of it came a beautiful stag. Ron was so shocked, he almost fell off his seat. He said, Harry, that's impossible. Do you realize how many people can do it at your age? Harry said, I know. I am freaking out. Draco saw the bright light and went to investigate and saw it came from Harry and Ron's compartment. He asked, what's going on here? Harry said, just practicing things. Ron said, yeah, Harry's just done something impossible. He can do a Patronus charm. Draco was impressed and said, yeah, I managed to do one as well. Plus my Lumos is green when I speak in Parseltongue. Harry said, I have the same problem, but my Lumos is red. Ron said, do you think because you are Parselmouths that means you can do spells stronger than normal wizards? Harry said, there's only one way to find out. Let's do Lumos without our wands. Draco said, I like that challenge. So both wizards said Lumos together and a red and green light shone bright like a Christmas tree. Ron said, wow, you two are impossible. Everyone got off the train and headed to Hogwarts. Once everyone was in their seats, sorting began. Adrian was sorted into Gryffindor and so was Ginny. Ron asked, should we tell Dumbledore what you and Draco can do? Harry replied, maybe, but not yet. Draco passed a note to Potter, saying, do you want to find the legendary snake? Harry wrote back saying, yeah, but I want your dad to come along. After breakfast Harry and Draco went to Lucius' office and knocked on the door. Lucius opened the door and said, Draco and Harry, what can I do for you boys? Draco replied, Dad, since me and Potter here can speak Parseltongue, can we go find Salazar's pet snake? Lucius said, wow, interesting idea. I shouldn't say yes, but I really want to. So yes, as long I get permission from Dumbledore. Stay here and I'll be back in a minute. Lucius headed to the headmaster's office and said, Headmaster, Potter and my son want to see the basilisk and want to know if I can go with them. Dumbledore said, great idea. But please take Severus along with you since he's a Parseltown as well. Just so the snake knows you aren't a threat. Lucius accepted this term and went to find Severus. He was in his room. Lucius said, "Hey Severus, the headmaster wants me and you to take Draco and Harry to the secret chambers." Severus asked, "Why Draco and Potter?" Lucius said, "Since they are both Parseltongays, that's why." Severus laughed and said, "Wow, so because James learned the language, his kid has learned the language." "Oh well, my theory works." Lucius was happy and went back to the room. He said, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is, you can go. The bad news is, Severus has to join us." Harry asked, "Why does Professor Snape have to go?" Lucius replied, "Because he's a Parseltown as well." Harry was surprised and said, "Okay, I guess I can learn to enjoy the company." All four arrived at the bathroom and everyone looked for the snake to open the hidden door. Harry and Draco found the snake on the sink and said, "Open." Together, it opened and big round black circle appeared. All four were amazed. Harry asked, "How do we get down there?" Lucius replied, "I think Tom said, stairs, in Parseltown." Draco did what his dad told him to do and magically stairs appeared. They all walked down the stairs in the pitch black. Severus shouted, "Lumos Maxima." And suddenly everything was visible. Harry looked at the ground and asked, "Is this basilisk skin on the ground?" Severus replied, "Yes, that's correct. There's another door at the end of this hallway. Let's go." They all walked to the door and opened the door. Behind it lay a big basilisk which said, "What are you doing how?" Here, Harry was the one to answer, "We wanted to meet the famous Mortadolf." The snake was impressed and replied, "You all speak my language." Severus replied, "Yes, your friend Tom taught us, he's a good wizard." The snake said, "I am glad Grindelwald is locked away. And I heard Pablo become pregnant." Severus said, "That's true. He's gone now." The snake asked, "Can you do a Patronus the way my Tom could?" Severus said, "Yeah, I'll show you." Severus did the Patronus charm and a beautiful doe appeared. Harry was surprised and without warning a stag appeared next to him. Draco and Lucius were shocked. Severus asked, "Where did that stag come from?" Harry blushed and said, "I'm sorry. I have been trying to control him." Severus said, "It's okay. When two people in the same room have the same Patronus but opposite gender, it's normal for it to happen." Harry asked, "Does that mean anything?" Severus replied, "No, it's just coincidence." Harry was relieved. Meanwhile Lucius was concerned and Draco simply didn't understand the significance. Everyone left the chambers and headed to their dorms. Tucked away in his office, Dumbledore sensed something was wrong. He went to Severus' chambers and asked, "What's wrong?" Severus replied, "It's true. Harry's my soulmate. I saw his Patronus." Dumbledore was impressed and said, "Well, over the summer break you better have a meeting with James." Severus said, "Okay, Headmaster, but it's not going to go well." Everyone entered main hall, had breakfast and went on the train to go home for another year. During the summer time Harry and his brother went to the Weasleys. James and Lily were in the house coming up with ideas on how to capture the latest escapee from Azkaban when they both heard a knock at the door. James opened the door to find Severus Snape standing there. James said, "Come inside." Severus went inside and sat on the couch. He said, "The reason I am here is I saw that Harry had a stag for his Patronus charm." James was stunned and asked, "If that's true, does that make him turn into Pablo?" Severus went guilty and replied, "Yeah, plus, you already have a grandchild." James said, "Oh my God, that's interesting." Lily said, "I'll say it, welcome to the family." Severus smiled and said, "Thanks Lily, that's very kind of you." James said, "Thanks sweetheart, I cannot wait until Harry finds out." Severus said, "Yeah, his 6th year going to be interesting." During Harry's 3rd year Dumbledore told everyone that you can study different creatures and learn how to look after them and how it takes a long time to become an animagus. Harry wanted to know more about Remus being a werewolf. His friends were more interested in animagus. Hermione said, "Werewolf is something you can't control but animagus is interesting." Ron said, "I am more interested in big animals, anything but spiders." Harry laughed and said, "Maybe Hagrid can teach you not to afraid of spiders." Ron said, I highly doubt that. I mean, he's got a huge spider friend. Hermione said, yeah, I heard the Minister of Magic G. Avenue Hagrid the money to get the spider as a baby. Harry said, yeah, Mr. Riddle's portrait in the school, it's near the defense classroom. Ron said, I wonder who those two people were. Hermione's aide, yeah, I heard they were here during the Great Grindelwald battle. Harry said, yeah, my dad told me of the legend. I would have liked to meet Pablo, he sounds interesting. Ron said, I wonder what happened to him. Harry said, I wish I'd known, but he was gone just after I was born, so Professor Snape told me. Hermione said, yeah, it's weird. Students told me that he doesn't get along well with Gryffindors. Ron said, wonder what makes you so special. They headed on their way to meet Hagrid by the pond. He was showing off a marvelous creature called Buckbeak. Hermione said, this creature is a hippogriff. It has front legs, wings, and head of a giant, and the body, hind legs and tail of an eagle. It is very similar to another magical creature, the griffin, with the horse rear replacing the lion rear. Draco saw this creature and said, he's a proud animal. My father warned me not to get too close. Hagrid said, well done, Hermione and Draco, you are both correct. Harry was the first to bow. And somehow the hippogriff bowed right away. Harry was stunned, and so was the class. Harry got on the hippogriff's back and flew around the castle. It was breathtaking. Harry returned and everyone else had a go on Buckbeak. Then it was winter time and everyone was busy studying, and Hermione said, I am going to do more research on Pablo. Because there's not much about him for someone being so famous. Hermione did a lot of research during the break. She didn't find much more information, so she decided to write a letter to the Ministry of Magic. Tom Riddle. She wrote, Dear Minister Riddle, my name is Hermione Granger and I am a student at Hogwarts. Why I am sending you a letter is because I would like more information of a friend of yours, Pablo J. Huntington. From Hermione. An owl sent the letter to the office and Tom read the letter and was amused by the letter. He wrote back, Dear Miss Granger, thank you for sending me a letter, and to answer your question, I knew Mr. Harrington since I was a child. When I was 11 and he was 16, he had a curse. He was actually 33 years old. He taught me everything about magic. When we arrived at Hogwarts and went to get sorted, I went int. Oh, Slytherin, and when the hat went on Pablo's head, the hat said, this boy is not 16, he needs a different house. Which shocked all the professors. The headmaster at the time took Pablo to his office. And they discussed how Pablo had a curse and was old enough to be a professor. Sometime later he became a teaching assistant, then he became a professor. There was a war going on and an evil wizard called Gellert Grindelwald was causing havoc. Professor Dumbledore and Pablo battled him, and at the end of the battle he became pregnant by the hands of Grindelwald. Some years later Pablo started to GE because his soulmate was born. I believe it's your potion, Professor Snape. That was Pablo's soulmate, and the details of how Pablo vanished is something I don't know. From Minster. Tom Riddle. An owl sent this back to Hermione. She read it twice and was fully interested and went to show Harry and Ron, who also read the letter. Harry was confused and said, that means Pablo and Snape aren't fully soulmates. Because Pablo's Patronus was an owl, not a stag. Hermione said, I am going to ask Snape about the disappearance of Pablo because Minister Tom didn't have a clue. Harry asked, may I come with you? Hermione replied, yeah, I would like the company. They walked to the potion master's office and knocked on the door. Snape answered the door and said, come inside. Hermione and Harry sat on the couch. Hermione said, I sent a letter to Minister Riddle. I asked him about Pablo Harrington. He told them about how they met and about their experience in Hogwarts and the Grindelwald War, but I didn't get anything about his disappearance. Snape said, I knew my past would come back to haunt me. Yes, I did know Pablo. He and me were great friends. He used to pick on me in class so I would be smarter. I was told about his condition, that he couldn't age beyond 16 until he met someone who can break the cure. When I turned 16 he spoke to me privately. He told me that I broke the curse, and Grindelwald cursed him that when the curse broke he would be the first wizard to become pregnant, and he delivered a healthy boy. We called him Daniel. Then he told me that he would become ill and he would have to leave the world, and then the fateful day came. He went to the hospital wing and both the Dumbledore brothers were there to see him disappear from the world. Hermione was very pleased with the story. Harry was super impressed with the story. He asked, Albus and Aberforth were there to see Pablo disappear. Snape nodded and replied, "Yes, that's how I believe Pablo and Aberforth somehow knew each other for a long time." Hermione was surprised and said, "Thank you. I think next me and Harry are going to have a word with Aberforth, then maybe the headmaster." Hermione and Harry decided to go and see the headmaster. Hermione said, "I don't think the headmaster is good at keeping secrets." Harry said, "Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Then when we see Aberforth we can ask him questions that he didn't realize we knew already." Hermione really liked the idea. Luckily McGonagall told today's password, which was candy floss. Harry laughed at the password and said, "He must have a really sweet tooth today." Hermione said, "Yeah, that's true." Hermione and Harry said the password and walked up the stairs and sat on a nearby couch. Dumbledore said, "Ah, Hermione and Harry, lovely to see you. What can I do for you?" Hermione said, "Well, Harry and I have been wondering who this Pablo was, and so far we found out that he was 16 because of a curse that Professor Snape broke, and he's the first wizard to get pregnant, and he adopted Minister Riddle." Dumbledore said, "Ah, you have done your homework. Well, tell you the truth, I didn't know much about him until he came to Hogwarts. I was surprised of how much knowledge he knew and shocked by the curse. Your father and him were great enemies and then good friends. It's kinda what happened with Daniel, Snape and Ollivander Wood. Now they have a good Quidditch team together." Harry was interested in how Pablo and his dad knew each other. He had to remember to send a letter home. He asked, "The night of his disappearance, were you there?" Dumbledore replied, "Yes, I was, and found out that Pablo was using an occlumency shield the whole time he was around anyone, which was impressive, but when he became ill I found out he was a time traveler." Hermione gasped and said, "Wow, Pablo, a time traveler. Awesome. That means he's from the future, because I only got a time turner and I can only go back a little bit." Harry said, "That means Pablo might not be called Pablo but something else." Hermione was shocked that Harry said that and replied, "Wow, Harry, well worked out." Dumbledore said, "I like to know who Pablo was before he changed his name to Pablo." Hermione and Harry left and they went to the Three Broomsticks to talk to Aberforth. When they arrived, the waitress said, "Aberforth is in his study, just go upstairs." Harry and Hermione went up stairs and found something to sit on and said, "Good evening, Aberforth. Harry and I have been on a journey to find out some information about Pablo, and our question is, did you know Pablo was a time traveler?" Aberforth said, "Wow, you have been on a journey. Before I answer your question I want to ask who you talked to." Hermione said, "Minister Riddle by letter, Professor Snape and your brother Albus." Aberforth was amused and said his story. "Well, to understand time travel you have to know that you can't go before your birth date but not during when you're growing up, or that will cause paradox. To answer your question I am going to be vague and not entirely truthful, or maybe I am. The answer is I knew Pablo in a different timeline." Harry was very confused and Hermione was listening closely and couldn't tell what Aberforth was trying to say and decided to ask, "Does that mean that Pablo changed something in the past and that changed this current timeline?" Aberforth replied, "Hermione, you are the cleverest witch to answer that. Yes, Pablo did, but I am not saying what he changed. You need to work that out yourself, then come back to me." Hermione agreed and they both left the Three Broomsticks and went to the common room to tell Ron about their journey. During the winter holidays Harry went home. He got settled back into his room just before his brother Adrian asked, "How was your first half of third year?" Harry replied, "It was really interesting. Me and Hermione were trying to find more about Professor Harrington when he was alive." Adrian asked, "Did you find anything interesting?" Harry replied, "Not much, just that Pablo was a time traveler and he sorted something in the past that changed his future." Adrian said, "Wow, I wonder what he sorted." The boys headed downstairs to have dinner. Harry and Adrian sat in their usual places and Lily asked, "How was school, boys?" Adrian said, "Fascinating. We learned about the founders." Harry said, "Well, me and Hermione learned that Pablo was a time traveler and that he came into the past to sort something for his future." Lily was surprised by what Harry said and James said, "Well, I knew Pablo. He taught Severus and Lucius how to become a parcel mouth. Then he taught whoever else wanted to become a snake speaker." Harry gasped in shock and asked, Does that mean Pablo was a snake speaker and he's related to Salazar Slytherin? James replied, no, he's not related to him. If I remember, the story Lucius told was that he was cursed with the gift because the person who killed his parents gave him the gift of snake speaker language. Harry gasped in shock and said, wow, I can't wait to tell Hermione. I bet with this information she'll work out what Pablo changed. James said, yeah, she'll work out something I have probably missed. Harry smiled and was getting excited. Lily said, my sister will be coming during the summer. Adrian said, excellent. I have been wondering how your sister coping with Magic World telling her husband. Lily said, well, we'll have to wait and see. Harry asked, can I please see the World Cup with my friend during my 5th-year holidays? James replied, yes, sure you can. Adrian is coming with you because Molly wants someone who's Ginny's age. Harry said, okay, that's fair. Adrian said, awesome, cannot wait. Harry went back to Hogwarts and told the story that his father had told him. Hermione was interested and said, I might have to talk to Lucius and get the full story. Harry said, I am coming with you. After breakfast, Harry and Hermione went to find Lucius in his office. They knocked on the door and went inside. Lucius said, Hermione, Harry, what can I do for you on this lovely day? Harry asked, we were wondering about the story Pablo told you, how he became a Parselmouth. Lucius said, I was wondering when you finally talked to me about Pablo. I went to his office in my 2nd year and asked him how he could talk to snakes. He said that his mum and dad were fighting a really evil wizard, and the evil wizard found where they lived and decided to kill the Who family. Pablo's mother stepped in front of the evil wizard and the curse killed his mum. She went back to the evil wizard and Pablo got hurt but did not die because the evil wizard was a snake speaker. He inherited the evil wizard ability. Harry was surprised and said, wow, what a story to hear growing up. It must have been tough for Pablo. Hermione said, thanks, that was really helpful. Lucius said, no problem. Harry and Hermione left and went to class and enjoyed the last week of term. In the Great Hall, Dumbledore made a speech saying, I hope you 3rd years had a good term. I usually wait until your 3rd year's turn 4th, but I cannot wait for when you return. You have no CL. But for the first half of 4th year you need to make a presentation of your favorite subject and show it off to all your peers. Hopefully all your parents would be joining the presentation as well. Why I decided to tell you now so you can have an early start during your summer, that is all. Hermione's mouth went wide open and looked at Harry and smiled and said, glad we did little research this term. Harry said, yeah, we definitely finding more about Pablo next term. Ron said, I have a project of my own that I want to work on. Hermione said, if you need help I am happy to help you. Ron said, thanks, that's much appreciated. Everyone went on train to go back to their families. The start of Harry's summer was interesting. He met Petunia, her husband, and their son Dudley. Adrian said, hey Dudley, what do you think of the house? Dudley said, it's weird. Vernon said, I understand you are training to be wizards. Harry replied, yeah, we are. I am sorry it skipped your wife. Vernon asked, is it rare for 2 Muggle children be Muggleborn? James replied, good question, I don't think that has ever been asked before. Harry said, wow, now that's a good idea for experiment. NT, but unfortunately me and my friend is doing a different subject. Adrian said, when I turned 14 I would happy do that as an experiment, because it would help my original research. Vernon said, looking forward to the results. When students arrived at Hogwarts, Hermione hugged her friends and said, I want to speak to Tom Riddle in person this year. Harry said, good idea, then we've spoken to everyone. Ron said, I had a good summer. I need to ask Lupin something. I'll see you in the dorm room. Ron went to Lupin's office and knocked on the door and had a conversation with Lupin. Ian, while Harry and Hermione went to Dumbledore headmaster's study and asked, is it possible to speak to Tom in person? Dumbledore sent a message by Flow Powder. Tom responded right away and was happy for students to visit him in his office. Hermione and Harry stepped through the fireplace and found a seat to sit down, and Hermione said, good morning sir, I am Hermione Granger, the girl who sent you the letter, and this is my friend Harry. Tom said, I have been wondering what the person looked like. I guess you have a lot of questions. Hermione nodded and asked, when did you first meet Pablo? Tom replied, As I said in the letter, I was only 10 when I met him and he was 16. He met me at the orphanage that I grew up in. He saved me. I didn't like the place very much. The kids there called me a freak. Because I can do something they couldn't do. Since Pablo was a mature wizard, he could adopt me, so we became brothers. Harry was so touched by the story and said, I guess it would have been different if a Hogwarts staff member found and took you to Hogwarts, because during the winter you would have to stay there. Tom said, yeah, that's true, I could be a whole different person then. Hermione had a light bulb moment and said, oh my god. I understand what Aberforth was talking about. Tom was confused, but not as much as Harry, and they looked at her with great confusion. Tom looked at Harry and said, I don't think I should say this, but you look a lot like Pablo. Harry gasped in shock and asked, do you have a picture at the age of 16? Tom handed the only picture of him. It was during his first year at home and he handed it to Harry. Hermione and Harry looked at the picture and said, I don't really see it. Hermione thanked them for the visit and headed back through the fireplace and went to the dorm room. Ron was already there and said, Lupin was really helpful. My next problem is to speak to Professor Snape. Harry gulped and said, good luck, mate. In Tom's office, he sent a letter to Professor Snape and said, Dear Snape, I just met Harry Potter and I hate to say this, but he looks a lot like Pablo. From Tom. Snape read the letter and said, Dear Tom, I have noticed. I can't say anything until his 6th year. From Severus. Tom read the letter and smiled and was curious if Harry was Pablo all along and it was his job to make sure that he had a good life. During the winter, Hermione stayed over at Harry's house so they could work on the project. Harry asked, what was it that Tom said that made you have an idea? Hermione said, Aberforth said Pablo Chan G'd something in his past to have this reality. I think the thing he changed was Tom. I think Tom was different. He wasn't a minister of magic. I think Tom was someone different. Harry's head was hurting with so much knowledge and said, wow, that's cool. I wonder what the other Tom was like. Hermione said, that's one mystery we won't know unless we ask Pablo. Harry bravely asked, do you think Tom killed Pablo's parents? Hermione gasped and replied, Harry James Potter, are you trying to make my head do too much work? Your question is annoyingly good and I cannot answer it, but we could end that question and see the audience's reaction. Harry laughed and said, please, that would be awesome. All students returned and also on the train was extra carriage for the mums and dads. Hermione's parents had a spell so they could see Hogwarts. The presentation started. Ron was the first Gryffindor. He said, my name is Ron Weasley and I am scared of spiders. My project is a potion that overcomes your fear temporarily so the person can understand it. I have been drinking the potion for over a month now and I need Hagrid to bring a spider near me and place it on my hands. Hagrid did exactly that and Ron showed the audience that he wasn't shaking. Ron said, at first I wouldn't even go near spiders, but now they don't bother me. Ron bowed and went off stage. Dumbledore said, wow, that's astonishing. I wonder if it helps werewolves. Ron said, I am sure Snape and I would show you how to make the potion, and if Remus wants to volunteer then I am happy to try. Remus's ears perked up and said, yes please. Ron, show me during your 5th year. Ron nodded and said, okay, that's a deal. Next was Draco. He said, my name Draco and I have discovered how to fly without a broom. Madam Hooch said, that's impossible. If you managed to do this then you might have made a new game of Quidditch. Draco gulped and said, okay, I'll prove it. To do this spell I needed to learn to have my own wand because it's the spell Professor Flitwick taught us in 1st year. Professor Flitwick asked, you don't mean you mastered Wingardium Leviosa? Draco nodded. He hovered his wand like you would do a broom. Because he adapted his wand to act like a broom. Draco said, I needed to improve my broom, which is why I went to see Mr. Ollivander and asked if a wand can have the hovering action as a broom. He said, yes it can. Why would you change your wand? I said if your own wand could point at you and do harmless spells then it might have the potential to make you fly. Draco did exactly that and flew once around Hogwarts Grand Hall. Draco bowed and everyone applauded. Then it was Harry and Hermione's turn. Hermione began. Our project began by me sending letters to Minister Tom and asking about Professor Pablo J. Harrington. He told me that he knew Pablo since he was 10 and he was 16. Harry said, "We found that information very useful, so we asked Professor Snape about Pablo. He told us that the curse Grindelwald gave him was able to produce Daniel. We are sorry that we weren't able to speak to you." Daniel said, "If you want information, I would happy to provide some after your presentation." Hermione said, "Yes please, that would mean we talked to everyone that were touched by Pablo." Then we talked to the headmaster Dumbledore. We found out he was a time traveler. Then we went to Aberforth and his information was very intriguing. He told us that Pablo traveled back to solve a problem. After winter we talked to Lucius to understand how Pablo could talk to snakes. This was because of an ill wizard trying to kill him, but his mother's love protected him. Finally we talked to Tom Riddle. Harry said, "That's when we found the significance of Aberforth's question about what he wanted to change. We think he wanted to change Tom. We think this Tom is different from the Tom Pablo knew, and so our question is, do you the audience think a different Tom killed Pablo's parents?" Everyone clap. At the end of Harry and Hermione's presentation, and everyone started to have a good feast. Unknown to everyone, Aberforth went to find Pablo painting and said, "Wow Pablo, you wanted a different reality. Now you certainly have one. When you return and wake up again, you are going to be shocked how much things have changed. You told me you never wanted to be famous, but now you're famous for a whole errant reason. I just hope people can cope when they realize you are Harry Potter. This Harry only got 2 more years until he turned 17. I just hope you are ready to see what this Harry went through." During the summer of Harry's 5th year he went to see the World Cup. It was a great big game. It was Ireland versus Bulgaria. Every wizard and witch came to the event. Harry's seats were high in the clouds and it was the best view. He could see the game perfectly. Adrian was really excited. He loved Quidditch. It was his year to try out for his team and he started seeing Ginny Weasley there. Love bloomed last year and it kept getting stronger. Harry was watching the marvel of the professional Quidditch players and wondered if Pablo was good at Quidditch. For the past couple of weeks he couldn't understand the feeling he gets when he's told something new about Pablo. He wondered how someone from the future could keep such a big secret like time traveling. The Bulgarians won the game. Air star Quidditch player caught the snitch Harry and everyone went back to their tent. When they arrived back he asked Hermione, "How does a wizard keep a secret?" Hermione replied, "Good question, I have been wondering myself." Harry went to see Sirius on the couch and sat next to him and asked, "I was wondering how a wizard keeps a secret. Can you tell me, Godfather?" Sirius replied, "That's simple. The wizard or witch would have learned occlumency. It's a talent inside your mind to keep things out of your head. When people learn the spell legilimency to read people's mind." Harry gasped in shock. ND said, "Wow, that sounds difficult. Can you show me?" Sirius said, "Okay, since it's your 5th year I can try the spell once on you." Sirius did the spell on Harry and to Sirius's surprise Harry was a natural at occlumency and couldn't understand why he was this good, and he said, "Wow Harry, you are already good at occlumency. How is that possible?" Harry was really confused and said, "I don't care. Now I'll ask Dumbledore when I return to school." Sirius said, "Good idea." A few weeks later all the students arrived at Hogwarts. Dumbledore waited until the new first years got settled and announced, "This year is important as Professor Snape is going to be the new defense teacher and my old friend Professor Slughorn is taking over potions, plus Professor Malfoy, Professor Black and Professor Lupin will be helping the 5th and 6th years in a mini-series of games. For 5th year your first challenge is how do you get a golden egg from a dragon. For the 6th years I want to know who can last the longest underwater. These challenges are like the task of the Goblet of Fire if it came to our school, and plus at the winter all 5th and 6th years won't be going home but going on a trip to Bulgaria to watch the Goblet of Fire take place, that is all." Harry and his friends couldn't believe it. Harry was super excited. Ron was super scared but really excited because his brother taught him a lot about dragons. Hermione was nervous but had lots of ideas. The Slytherins were really excited. Draco thought of an idea that could work as a team, they all whispered. The Ravenclaws thought of lots of different ways. They all suggested different ideas. The Hufflepuffs only had a couple suggestions. They decided on the most interesting idea. At the Gryffindor table Ron said, "My oldest broth." Worked with dragons. He's currently learning how to communicate with dragons. Harry said. That's fantastic. I suppose there's 4 different dragons. Hermione said. That's the logical sense, I suppose we are going to find out after the winter break. The winter arrived and ended just as fast. The 6th years did show their skills underwater. When it came to 5th year there were 3 dragons. Wettish Short Snout was the Hufflepuff dragon, the common Welsh Green was Ravenclaw dragon, the Chinese Fireball was the Slytherin dragon, and the Hungarian Horntail was the Gryffindors. The Hufflepuffs used a confusing spell on the Swedish Short Snout and used a broom to get the egg. They got awarded with most common way to get the egg. The Ravenclaws attempted to transfigure Annette, her dragon, to confuse the common Welsh Green and use the invisible potion to get the egg. They got awarded points for the most unique way. The Slytherin used a blind spell on the Chinese Fireball. The Slytherins got deducted points because the Chinese Fireball stepped on some fake eggs. They got minus points and need to try better. The Gryffindors had an interesting approach. Ron looked at the Hungarian Horntail and found out he was male not female, so he told his pals simple phrase to tell the dragon. Harry said to the dragon, "These eggs don't belong to you." Hermione said, "We need the brightly colored egg." Ron said, "Can we have the golden egg?" The dragon roared and said, "What polite wizards, of course you can." Dean and Neville grabbed the egg together. All the teachers were impressed. ND said, "Gryffindors win the task, well done." When all tasks were complete, Dumbledore summoned a magic train to transport the students to Durmstrang Institute. The Goblet of Fire game was most impressive. The school was so different compared to Hogwarts. Victor Crumb was representing the school in the game. The first talk was dragons. Surprisingly, Victor's dragon was a Chinese Fireball. The Slytherin cheered when they saw the dragon and were shocked how Victor disabled the dragon. He did exactly what the Slytherin did at their attempt. The Gryffindors saw how another school, the Ilvermornies, got past the Hungarian Horntail. They used a broom. The Bobaton school dragon was the Swedish Short Snout. Dumbledore explained that there were only 3 schools competing. The Hogwarts students walked each task and were fascinated with maze challenge. Harry asked, "What do you have to do in the maze?" Dumbledore replied, "It tests your fears and see if you can control them." Ron asked, "I suppose taking my potion before the maze is illegal?" Dumbledore said, Now that's a good point. I might need to ask Minister Riddle that question." Remus said, "Please do, because I can now control my WOLF during the full moon perfectly, and I can almost stop turning into a werewolf." Harry said, "Wow, that's amazing. I bet Sirius is really happy with you." Sirius said, "You have no idea, it's amazing." Emus went over to Dumbledore with Harry and said, "Sirius tried legilimency on Harry during the summer and somehow his shield is amazing." Dumbledore gasped in shock and said, "Wow, that's rare. It might have to do with your soulmate connection or something else." Harry asked, "What soulmate connection?" Dumbledore replied, "When the feast begins next year, go and see Snape and he'll explain everything." Chapter 43 Summer Conversation. Harry was nervous all summer. He couldn't understand why Dumbledore wanted him to see Snape. After the feast he told his friends what Dumbledore told him. Ron was surprised, but Hermione said, "I had a feeling for a while, but I wasn't able to tell you because of the rules in Soulmates." Harry said, "Yeah, I didn't want the conversation too early as well." Ron replied, "Well, I say that you can't change destiny." Harry said, "Yeah, maybe. Pablo knew his fate, tried to change it but couldn't." Ron said, "Maybe, but I heard he died on the 31st of July." Hermione gasped and asked, "How did you know that?" Ron said, "Remus and myself had long conversation, plus Lucius talked about Pablo and his house elf Dobby." Harry said, "Oh, Dobby was the house elf, I have been wondering." Then an elf appeared and said, "Did someone say my name?" Harry said, "Ron, and I said your name." Dobby looked at the young wizards and said, "Wow, that's weird. I usually only can go to Pablo's F.A. Miley members, which is why I was helping Daniel." Harry gulped and said, "Maybe one of us are related to Pablo." Hermione gasped and said, "Wow, if that ever happened it would have changed our project Beck. We didn't talk to Pablo's house elf." Dobby left and went to see Daniel again and said, "I think I found out who was Pablo." Daniel said, Yeah, I already know because my dad and Harry are soulmates. Which means Pablo is going to turn into Harry next year. Dobby smiled and said, this is going to be exciting. Snape saw the two talking and said, so it is true Harry is Pablo next year. Daniel nodded and said, yeah, Dad. Plus it was Tom that Harry changed. The other Harry didn't have parents. Snape said, wow, that's amazing. That means Aberforth knew all along. Daniel said, yes, that's true. Ape went to the Hog's Head Inn and found Aberforth. He sat on the couch and said, I can't believe you knew that Harry was Pablo past and present. Aberforth said, well, it seems my past has finally come. Full circle, I thought Pablo's name was obvious. Pablo J. Harrington or Harry James Potter. I mean, it's clever doing your surname name as forename. Snape gasped in shock and said, okay, now I feel silly. Why didn't I put 2 and 2 together? And it's quite cool actually. Harry got to see me grow up and I got to see Harry grow up. Aberforth said, wow, it did go full circle. You got an interesting conversation with Harry at the beginning of term. Snape said, yeah, really, how do you tell a boy that he's your soulmate and he also watched his soulmate grow up as well? Aberforth said, about Harry being Pablo. Don't go into full detail, just warn him next year he's going to be ill for a while. Snape said, okay, see you later. The 1st of September arrived far too quickly. On the train Harry and his friends had a conversation. Hermione said, you know that Snape is going to say about soulmates. Harry said, yeah, you can't reveal until a wizard or witch turns 16. It's an annoying rule. I mean, I've known since 3rd year and I had to wait until now to tell him. Ron said, I can't believe I am saying this, but I think Snape had to wait longer. I bet he's known since your 1st year. Harry laughed and said, wow, Ron. Does this mean you don't mind Snape? Ron replied, well, I don't mind him. I got to get used to him since you and him will eventually start dating. Harry said, yeah, I forgot about that concept. All students arrived at the train. All 1st years got settled, and after the meal Harry went to the dungeon and knocked on the door. He sat on the sofa and said, well, this is the day my life's going to change. Snape said, I guess you already know what I am going to say to you. Harry said, yeah, I've kinda known since 3rd year when I saw your Patronus. I wasn't allowed to say anything until this year. Snape said, you're taking it better than I thought you would. When it happened to me I wasn't prepared and I was nowhere ready to be a dad. Harry said, wow, now. I do feel more relived than I did walking down here. Snape replied, well, that's one of the reasons. The other is that next year during September can you return to Hogwarts because you'll want to see me again. Something big is going to happen to you and I can't explain until it happens. Harry was shocked about this news and said, wow, now that sounds exciting. Can I tell my friends? Snape replied, yeah, defiantly. If your pal Hermione works it out, can you please point her in my direction and we can discuss if she's right or wrong. Harry said, all right, see you during class. Harry left the office and went to the common room to find his friends. They were already sitting on the couch, so he decided to join them. Hermione said, Harry, you are back, how did it go? Harry said, really well, we rewrite about the soulmate thing, but he also said that something major is going to happen to me in September next year. Ron said, wow, wonder what that can be. Hermione replied, I might have to do some research because there's nothing usually special for a wizard when they turn 17. Harry said, well, if you do find something out, don't tell me or Ron. Go straight to Professor Snape and he'll tell you if you were right or wrong. Hermione said, okay, I'll keep that in mind. Anything else? Harry said, yeah, I am also coming to Hogwarts to discover what the major thing is. Ron said, well, we are coming with you. Harry said, thanks guys, are you excited for this year? Ron, Hermione and Harry discussed what they wanted to learn this year. All three wanted to learn Animagus and Dissipating. In the headmaster's office Snape sat on a seat and said, well, me and Harry had the talk. It went really well. He already had a feeling about the soulmate thing, so that was easier for me, but he's curious what's happening to him next year. Dumbledore said, that's a relief about the soulmate, and I cannot believe the major thing is happening next year. I am not ready. Snape said, how do you think I feel or Harry because he's not going to understand he's Pablo and it was his future he wanted to change. Dumbledore said, well when that day arrives I want to ask him why he wanted to change his past. Snape said, excellent question. Harry and Hermione didn't ask that question. I was hoping they would and that was what date did Pablo leave? Dumbledore said, I was relieved when they did ask the question. Snape said, I also told Harry if his friend Hermione works something out come and find me. The first class was charms. Professor Flitwick said, now 6th years this term you'll be practicing wand-less magic this year. The most difficult is the spell Accio but that spell is difficult for different reasons. Alohomora is the most interesting spell to do wand-less magic. Draco said, yeah Alohomora is difficult because some wizards put difficult locking charms on the door. Ron said, when you learn Accio spell wand-less can you Accio someone else's as wand? Flitwick said, no unless you have disarmed your opponent first. Everyone practiced Accio and Alohomora. Flitwick was right about how difficult the charms were. Next was break. Hermione went to the library to search what P pens to wizard when they turned 17. She found nothing which was odd then had an epiphany and decided to send a letter to Daniel. She wrote, Dear Daniel, I am Hermione and was wondering when your father left. It's something I wanted to figure out myself. My name is Hermione. Plus it's something your father Snape said to Harry that made me rethink who Pablo is. From Hermione. An owl sent the letter. Daniel was surprised to see Hermione sending him a letter as it was out of the blue. He read the letter and he replied, Dear Hermione, I was 6 years old when my dad Pablo left. He said to Severus that his time was up and he'll return at some point in the future. It was in September he left. I shouldn't be saying this but Harry Potter was 2 months old when he left if that helps the year as well. From Daniel. Hermione gulped and reread the letter and went straight to defense class. They were learning how to improve your Patronus charm and what's the best disarming spell and how to do it wand-less. After class Hermione stayed behind. She walked up to Snape and asked, Professor I was wondering, is there a connection between Harry and Pablo? Snape smiled and replied, I can't go into full details yet but when next September comes I am sure everyone will find out. In the potions class it was learning how to make the most difficult potions and why they are the hardest. Professor Slughorn said, the truth potion is the most difficult, you have to learn it if you want to be an Auror who makes potions. The liquid luck potion is the most difficult potion because no one knows where the potion comes from or when it was first made. The elixir to induce euphoria is most challenging because if you do it wrong it could end up making the person hate you. But don't worry everyone he potion we are working on this term is Draft of Living Death. Everyone in the class sighed in relief. Hermione said, is there a potion to help Animagus? Professor Slughorn said, yes there is Professor McGonagall has the potion ready for your next class. Harry grinned so much that he stayed awake during the whole class. After lunch everyone headed to Transfiguration and were really excited. McGonagall gave everyone the potion. She said, this potion only transform you into your animal. After that you need to work on the spell to transform you back and that will be your homework for the winter time. The spell is your animal kind and say Amato Animo Animato Animagus to transform. All the class drank the potion. Ron turned into a beagle, Hermione was a Cheshire cat, Draco was a bearded dragon, Neville was a salamander. Dean was an Irish setter and Harry was Snowy Owl. Which gave McGonagall the most fright and then the students returned and she said, thank God that's over it was like a petting zoo in my classroom. Hermione was amused of what she was and what Harry was and couldn't wait to tell Professor Snape. Everyone went to dinner. Hermione met McGonagall who was already heading to Snape's office. Hermione said, you put 2 and 2 together. Minerva nodded and said, I was instantly surprised and couldn't understand. They arrived at Snape's office and headed inside. Snape was surprised to see 2 people inside his office. He asked, what's going on this time? Minerva replied, well during my class it was Animagus and to my surprise Harry turned into a snowy owl. Snape was surprised and said, well that is a shock I didn't see that coming, when Pablo returns he's going to be very surprised. Hermione said, I wonder why Pablo's Patronus was snowy owl and Harry's Patronus is a deer. Snape smiled and said, I am sure all our questions are going to be answered soon enough. The winter break was interesting. Harry went home with his brother Adrian. When they arrived, Adrian went to his room and Harry found his parents in the kitchen. He said, I found out me and Snape are soulmates and something interesting is supposed to happen to me in September next year. James and Lily were shocked about the thing that will happen next year and asked, do you know what is happening to you? Harry replied, no, I haven't got a clue, and I found out my animagus form, it's a snowy owl. James said, wonderful. A snowy owl, it's like the imaginary friend you had while you were growing up. Harry said, maybe it's the owl I was supposed to own at the pet store. James said, yeah, it's unfortunate that Hagrid bet us to it. Then there was a knock at the door. It was Hagrid. He said, well, since Harry is graduating next year, I've decided to give him this beautiful owl as a present since he does so well in my class. Harry was speechless and said, thank you so much, she's beautiful. I am going to call her Hedwig. James and Lily were shocked at the kind gesture and said, thank you so much. Lily said, once you can transform into your owl, you and Hedwig can have a race together. Harry laughed and said, I can't wait. All students returned to school. All 6th years were practicing their animagus every chance they had. Hermione was still wondering what's the big thing happening to Harry next year during Hogsmeade trip. She decided to go to Aberforth's Hog's Head Inn alone. Hermione arrived at the Hog's Head Inn and went to find Aberforth. He was in his room on the couch. Hermione went inside and sat on the couch. She asked, how long have you known about Harry being Pablo? Aberforth replied, since Severus's 4th year, when Pablo started to panic about being pregnant is when I knew, but my memory goes back as far as an alternate present currently. Hermione said, wow, that's impressive. That means you know why Harry left to become Pablo. Aberforth replied, in any reality you are always the cleverest witch. Yes, I do know, but I am not allowed to say until Pablo returns. Hermione smiled and said, well, I believe Harry went to the past to just change Tom Riddle, but something happened to him before he could leave. Aberforth said, you are right about Tom. And the something happened to him was unplanned. Hermione asked, you mean Pablo being pregnant and having Daniel wasn't planned? Aberforth nodded and said, yeah, Pablo didn't know about the soulmate thing before he left. He hadn't a clue. He was hoping to leave when Tom graduated. Hermione was shocked and said, wow, that's amazing. My final question is, what's so special about Daniel's birthday being on Halloween? Aberforth laughed and said, you are the first witch or wizard to ask that question. I am sorry, but that's the only question I am not allowed to answer. Hermione grumbled and asked, the potion Pablo made, would I be able to make it? Aberforth replied, no, it's really top secret, but you don't have to worry. When Pablo returns inside Harry, every memory of his past will come into everyone's head. Hermione gasped and replied, wow, that means everyone will know Pablo and what he changed. That's super exciting. Hermione left the inn and went to lunch. She was so focused and said to her friends, I heard Pablo returning, and when he returns everyone going to have the alternate memory of a different past. Harry was shocked and said, that's amazing. That means I can meet Pablo in person. Hermione smiled and said, yeah, I can't wait to understand him completely. Snape and Albus heard what Hermione said. They discussed and Snape said, wow, that's interesting. That means everyone will know what Pablo changed. Albus said, yes, plus we'll understand the significance of Daniel's birthday being on Halloween. Severus said, well, the thing about Daniel's birthday is because of something that major happened in Pablo's past. Dumbledore said, well, that major event must have made him travel beyond his past, but maybe during his parents' years. Severus said, he went further than his parents. He went to Tom Riddle and the Great War era. Dumbledore said, that's correct, maybe it was to do with Tom Riddle after all. The rest of term was interesting. All the 6th year students managed to become their animagus. Not all students learned wandless magic. Harry was sad. The next year he graduated and something major going to happen in his life. He said farewell to his friends, met his brother on the train, had a long chat with, then went for the break and was excited to what turning 17 means for him. During the summer Harry studied more and more. Harry was ready to become an Auror or a professor. He couldn't decide. Harry knew that he enjoyed teaching more than making sure wizards and witches were behaving themselves. Members. To Harry's surprise, Daniel showed up with Severus and Tom Riddle. Harry said, "Thanks for coming on this lovely day to celebrate me turning 17, I can't believe it." During the festivities there were lots of good chatting, fun and games. Harry wandered over to Snape and Daniel and said, "Wow, I can't believe this day." Daniel said, "I am glad you and Severus are enjoying each company." Harry said, "Well, it's like destiny can't keep us apart. I hope in time you'll call me Dad as well as Severus, or Stepdad technically." Daniel laughed and said, "I'll get used to it." A small elf appeared and said, "I heard it's Harry Potter birthday, so me and a giant called Hagrid made you this cake." Harry was surprised to see Dobby at his party and he looked the flat pink icing cake with, "Happy birthday Harry," in blue writing. The big oaf Hagrid appeared and said, "Sorry, I might have sat on it. That's why I asked Dobby here to bring you the cake." Harry said, "Thanks very much." Then suddenly Harry felt a little unwell and looked at Hagrid, asking, "Did you not send me a cake on my 11th birthday?" Hagrid replied, "Nope, I certainly didn't." Snape could see some of Pablo's past seeping into Harry's mind. He walked up to Harry and said, "The thing I mentioned. You might have temporary new memories until the actual event happens." Harry said, "Wow, that's cool and odd at the same time. Why do I have these memories?" Snape said, "It's because you are more connected to Pablo than the rest of us. You'll experience the change more than anyone else." Harry said, "That's awesome, I can't believe I get to experience Pablo memories firsthand." The night arrived and everyone left the party. Remus had not been counting the days for the full moon. He looked at the night sky. It was indeed a full moon and nothing seems odd. Remus didn't feel the urge to change. He looked at Sirius and said, "Look Padfoot, I haven't changed, Moony is dormant." Sirius couldn't believe his eyes and said, "Wow, this is incredible, I can't believe Ron and Snape's potion worked." Harry looked at his dad friends and smiled. Then suddenly he had another memory. They were in an old abandoned house talking about how it was Peter the framed someone and Snape barged in and thought how brilliant to catch them red-handed. Then himself disarmed a teacher. Hermione was cross. Harry returned to the present and decided to go to bed. He went upstairs and fell asleep. In the morning Harry got up, had breakfast as normal. His head unexpectedly felt like it was splitting in two. He said, "OWWW. Mum, Dad, I got a really bad headache." James said, "Well, that means you are getting ready for the major event. You need to calm your mind." Harry did as he was told. Then another memory surfaced of when he was really young. A hooded figure was standing in front of his mother and killed her. Harry returned to the present and cried, "I don't want to know how Pablo coped. He lost both his parents as a baby and somehow survived." Lily asked, "How do you know this, Harry?" Harry replied, "I just saw it with my very own eyes." James said, "Oh well, we need to get you to Hogwarts before September." Lily, James, Harry and Adrian quickly flew to Dumbledore, saying, "We're coming through the fireplace." Dumbledore was okay with that, so all four arrived at Hogwarts. Snape was there. He carried Harry to the exact same bed that Pablo had used. Snape comforted Harry, "Don't worry Harry, everything going to be all right, I'll explain in the morning." Harry was on the bed. His headache was settling and said, "Somehow this bed calms me down so quickly. I don't understand. Every time I got hurt I would ask Pomfrey to allow me to lie on this bed and no other." Snape said, "Ah, that means you subconscious knows thing better than you actual mind." Harry rested and fell into a better sleep than he had in a long while. A spirit went straight inside Harry, and when he woke he saw Snape still there and said, "I must have done something good." Snape said, "Yeah, you did. Are you okay, Harry?" Harry replied, "Yeah, I am just waiting for my mind to catch up with this world." Snape said, "Ah, you are Pablo at the moment." Harry said, "That's correct, good to meet you again." Pablo looked around the hospital wing. He was still getting used to wearing glasses again. A voice inside his head said, "I am Pablo, this is incredible." Pablo said, "Ah, I can have conversations with this Harry, that's going to be interesting." Harry said, "Your world has changed a lot. Mum and Dad are alive and we have younger brother called Adrian. Remus and Sirius are still alive and well. Remus can maintain his humanity when being a werewolf. Even to teach for a while. Draco can speak parcel tongue. Tom Riddle is the Minster of Magic. Pablo was overwhelmed with the new information and new memories. He said, "Wow, I didn't think the world would change this much." Harry said, "Oh my gosh, that means Daniel is my kid." Pablo replied, "Yeah, that's right, how is Daniel?" Harry replied, "He's was Slytherin but acted like a Gryffindor, which is really funny." Pablo laughed and said, "That's hysterical. Our genes must be typically ironic, that whatever house at Hogwarts our family are in, we act the complete opposite." Aberforth came in the hospital wing and said, "Welcome home, Pablo. Great world you have created." Pablo said, "Yeah, you ready to give everyone my original world memories?" Aberforth said, "Yes, let's get started." Harry used the wand and said, "Memoir restore memories." A big yellow light came out the wand and vanished all around the castle and the whole world. Ron and Hermione were zapped with new memories and rushed to find Harry. They arrived together and Ron said, "Harry, what with the memories?" Pablo said, "Well, I am not your Harry at the moment, I am Pablo, and the memories you received was my past and why I time traveled." Hermione said, "Oh my gosh, I was right about you all along." Pablo said, "Yeah, that's correct." Ron said, "I can give you the best surprise ever, say Hedwig." Pablo said, "Funny request but okay, Hedwig." Then a snowy owl landed on his arm and hooted at him. Pablo's tears poured down his face and said, "Hello, old girl." Hermione said, "You thought that was cool, your animagus is a snowy owl." Pablo said, "You are joking me on, really?" "Oh my gosh." Pablo remembered the spell and instantly turned into a snowy owl and then back into human form. "Why didn't you tell me?" Harry said, "Well, I got Hedwig as a graduation present from Hagrid and we learned animagus during my 6th year." Pablo returned smiling so hugely and asked, "Can this day get any better?" Then Lily, James and Adrian arrived and saw Harry. James said, "I guess you are getting used this world, Pablo." Pablo looked at James and replied, "Yeah, Dad, it's so strange and wonderful." Adrian said, "It's so weird, having memories of your other life and I was never there and you were having a relationship with Ginny but now I am." Pablo said, "Well, yeah, I was thinking about having a relationship with Ginny, but my heart wasn't ready. I lost too much to even think about starting anything romantic." Tom, Daniel and Bellatrix arrived by Flo and Tom said, "I received new memories of someone who looks like me but entirely evil." Pablo said, "Sorry Tom, I realize you have changed the most." Tom smiled and said, "Wow, it's pretty incredible, thanks for making me the best person I can be." Bellatrix said, "Oh, I didn't RRY Tom and married Rodolphus Lestrange, how weird." Pablo gasped in shock and said, "Okay, I didn't see that coming." Tom said, "Yeah, my wonderful wife and our child is starting Hogwarts this year, which is going to be awesome. Her name is Delphine." Pablo said, "Wow, this is the perfect world." Dumbledore arrived and saw everyone having a reunion. He walked up to Harry and said, "Thanks for saving my life and giving me a better life. I can finally retire and put Professor McGonagall in charge." Minerva said, "Thank you so much, I would be honored, as long as Severus is my deputy head." Snape gasped in shock and said, "I would love that." Pablo said, "I already taught as a teacher, I think I might consider a new path." Hermione asked, "Why don't you be a writer and tell of your journey, before you time traveled up to now?" Pablo said, "What a wonderful idea, that could definitely be my part-time hobby." Ron asked, "Have you ever considered being an professor of a different subject, like your very own subject, like time traveling or something?" Pablo said, "That's a good idea, I could be a storyteller of my journey and then turn it into a biography." Snape said, I like the sound of that, you Sue. LD do it in the library and have the students that want to know about you, can come and talk to you." Pablo said, "Sounds like a good idea." Over time that's exactly what happened. Everyone enjoyed having new memories. Harry did teach for a while but enjoyed writing their story. They called it, The Journey on How Harry Became Pablo. Ron and Hermione got married. Ron became a Quidditch star player. Hermione was secretary to the new Ministry of Magic. Draco taught how to speak parcel tongue like his father. Remus went to find other werewolves and taught them the potion that made him able to control the wolf inside. Daniel became an orer and a Quidditch star with Oliver Wood. Delphine grew up to be a helper in the Ministry of Magic. Tom eventually retired and Cornelius Fudge took over the position. Albus did retire. He really enjoyed retirement. When the new term started, it did take him a while to not pop into Hogwarts. Albus got used, seeing his brother Aberforth at home and enjoyed talking about how difficult it was to keep Pablo secret. Severus and Harry got married together. There were a lot of people at the wedding. Pablo got used to being called Harry again. It did felt weird for a while. James and Lily really enjoyed having the family around and enjoying getting along with her sister. When they arrived, Petunia said, "Wow, Harry is pretty remarkable. I am sorry we didn't treat well in the beginning." Harry said, "Don't worry, you did your best. There isn't a guide for muggles about if their child has magic." James said, "Well, I am glad your suggestion for new staff members go to the Muggleborn houses and explain to the family they have magic has worked." Harry said, "Yeah, I just wished I had that growing up, that's why I suggested it." Adrian said, "Well, for two sisters it's rare for only one to have magic. There's no logical explanation." Severus said, "Sounds like you would do well as a potion teacher." Adrian said, "Thanks. Well, my fiancée wants to be the Hogwarts Quidditch coach after she plays with her favorite team." Severus smiled at that and said, "Well, the future is looking bright." Harry said, "Well, I was hoping it would go great. I didn't expect it to go perfect. That's the problem with time travel. It's a hit or miss. Imagine if I got it all wrong." The world was peaceful and no more big surprises happened. The end.